Chapter 706. Chu Liyue's entire body stiffened. Only her heart was beating furiously as though it was about to jump out of her mouth. Her mind was completely blank. Back then she had been forced into a desperate situation and had resolutely chosen to commit suicide. But before that she had specially released the 9-colored sky pheasant. Generally speaking, when a master died, their contracted magical beasts would definitely die as well. At that time, Chu Liyue had forcefully rescinded the contract between them, hoping that her choice would not affect it. However, the situation had been dire. Even Chu Liyue herself did not know what had happened in the end. Previously, she had tried to ask around indirectly, and the news she had received was that the 9-colored sky pheasant was already dead. Even though Chu Liyue was filled with grief, she had gradually accepted this matter and buried it deep in her heart. Originally, she had thought that this matter would pass by forever and that no one would ever remember that there had been a 9-colored sky pheasant in this world that had accompanied her for many years. But now, that half of a wing that had suddenly swept past had completely dumbfounded Chu Liyue. An absurd idea popped up in her mind. Perhaps, possibly, probably, the 9-colored sky pheasant from back then was actually still alive. Chu Liyue's eyes did not blink as she stared at the colorful barrier in front of her. That's right. This barrier was also colorful. Upon closer inspection, wasn't it exactly the same color as the 9-colored sky pheasant's body? Chu Liyue clenched her fists tightly in her sleeves. Her heart felt like it was being hung by something and her chest was empty. However, it also felt like it was being squeezed by something crazily, making her so uncomfortable that she could not speak. If the 9th-grade magical beast inside was really... But, what if it wasn't? Chu Liyue's knuckles turned white. After the surging anticipation and desire, a trace of fear actually appeared. Although the 9-colored sky pheasant was rare, there was more than one in this world. Two thoughts were frantically fighting in Chu Liyue's mind. One was thinking, maybe it is? Maybe the heavens really took pity on her and returned her magical beast to her? The other was thinking, how could there be such a coincidence in this world? If it wasn't, then wasn't she rejoicing for nothing? Sometimes, giving people hope and then letting them down was even harder to accept than not having any hope at all. Chu Liyue's eyes were dry and her throat seemed to be blocked by something. Her limbs were cold. He had already lost too much. She definitely didn't want to experience such pain again. Mu Hongyu saw that there was something wrong with Chu Liyue's expression and felt worried. Liyue, what's wrong with you? She had almost never seen Chu Liyue reveal such an expression. It was as if she was waiting for something, but also as if she was afraid of something. Was she looking at the magical beasts inside the colorful barrier? But, didn't she only see half a wing? Chu Liyue shook her head gently. I'm fine. How did this look like she was fine? Mu Hongyu pursed her lips. Seeing that Chu Liyue didn't seem to want to say more and her attention was still on the magical beast that was breaking through, she could only swallow her words. Forget it. I'll ask her what's going on later. Suddenly, Mu Hongyu glanced out of the corner of her eye and accidentally saw Tuanzi, who was squatting on Chu Liyue's shoulder. There seemed to be a flash of colorful light on its body. It was fleeting. Mu Hongyu blinked and took a closer look, only to find that the light had disappeared. Tuanzi was still the original Tuanzi. Its whole body was furry and blood-red. There didn't seem to be any change. Maybe she had seen it wrong. Mu Hongyu rubbed her eyes. She had been staring at the colorful barrier for so long that she felt like she was going to hallucinate. Tuanzi calmly leaned against Chu Liyue's neck. Chu Liyue didn't look back but subconsciously patted its body. If she turned her head at this moment, she would see that Tuanzi's eyes were closed. And between its eyebrows, there was a faint flash of light. But Chu Liyue didn't see any of these. She just looked up. The 6th bolt of heavenly lightning had already gathered in the layers of dark clouds. Now she was more anxious than anyone else. She couldn't wait for all the remaining heavenly thunder to fall at once. As long as the light on the colorful barrier faded away and became transparent, she would be able to see what was going on inside. And she wanted to know if the magical beast that was breaking through inside was the same as she had guessed. The waiting time seemed to be particularly hard to bear. Chu Liyue counted silently in her heart. The 6th heavenly thunder fell with a loud bang. Boom, boom. The power of each heavenly thunder was stronger than the previous one. When the 6th heavenly thunder fell, it even tore through the void. Behind it, a straight black crack in space stretched across the sky. Came down from the top to the bottom. Violent energy ripples spread out in all directions, sweeping across the area. All the trees within the perimeter were overturned. Even Fourth Lei, who was guarding at the front, was forced back 3 steps. He cursed in his heart and smashed the hammer in his hand onto the ground. A barrier instantly appeared in front of him. He turned around and shouted at Chu Luiyue and the others. "What are you waiting for? Hurry up and retreat." Were they looking for death by standing so close to him? He was going to stay here and be in charge of guarding. What were they doing here? Whoosh! An invisible wave surged over. It went straight for Chu Luiyue. Chang Wanzhou's expression turned slightly cold and he immediately stepped forward. A sparrow blue flame flashed past. Boom! The 2 waves of energy collided violently. Mu Hongyu immediately grabbed Chu Luiyue's arm and was about to retreat with her. "Luiyue, hurry up and leave." This position was too dangerous. However, Chu Luiyue suddenly grabbed her hand and then slowly and firmly pushed it away. "Both of you retreat first." Mu Hongyu had a blank expression. What? What did that mean? "You're not retreating with us, you're going to stay here?" Chu Luiyue stared at the colorful barrier in front of her. Light shone around them so bright that one couldn't open their eyes. However, she could still clearly see that the colorful flowing light in the middle of the barrier was fading away quickly. She could already see the thick branches and leaves of the curly fir tree. Just a little bit more, Luiyue." Mu Hongyu urged her again and grabbed her hand again. "Luiyue, the heavenly thunder will only get stronger and stronger. Let's retreat a little first." No matter what Chu Luiyue wanted to do, they had to protect their own lives first, right? Chu Luiyue looked at Chang Wanzhou in front of him and quickly ordered in a low voice. Chu Luiyue looked at Chang Wanzhou, who was in front of him. Chang Wanzhou turned around, his exquisite eyes filled with shock. Seeing Chu Luiyue's determined expression, he pursed his lips and nodded slightly. Since it was her order, he naturally had to obey it unconditionally. Chang Wanzhou moved quickly. He pulled Mu Hongyu and Yi Ranran and retreated. The 2 of them were no match for Chang Wanzhou. They were taken away just like that. Rumble. The 7th Luiyue struck down ruthlessly. Chu Luiyue clenched her fists tightly and took a step forward. Mobile users, please browse and read. For a better reading experience, please visit the website. Chapter 707. Shangguan hid her aura perfectly, so when she suddenly appeared, no one present actually noticed her existence in advance. So when her figure entered everyone's sight, it truly shocked everyone. She was stained with a bit of dirt, but it wasn't much. Compared to Jiang Yuqing and Elder Qiushi, it was almost negligible. At first glance, her hair was just a little messy and 2 drops of blood splattered on her face. Right now she was charging towards the barrier at full speed. She obviously wanted to attack the 9-colored heavenly pheasant that was breaking through. The aura surging around her actually reached a shocking peak 7th grade. Chu Luiyue squinted her eyes, and a trace of coldness flashed past the corner of her eyes. Peak 7th grade, Shangguan Wan's Yuan Meridian is crippled now, but she can actually still pretend to have such abilities. Can be seen that she spent a lot of effort. Seeing that she was getting closer and closer to the barrier, Chu Luiyue's heart suddenly surged with disgust. Even if this 9-colored heavenly pheasant had nothing to do with her, she wasn't willing to see Shangguan Wan succeed. Shangguan Wan didn't have the right to snatch it from the same clan of fiends that she once contracted with. Other people only thought that Shangguan Wan came for the so-called mythical beast's blood, but Chu Luiyue was very clear that her motive for coming here was definitely not just this. Wanting to contract with a mythical beast. Why don't you see if you have the ability and luck to do so? Chu Luiyue paused in her footsteps and a thought flashed across her mind. Lei Laosi, who was standing closest to the barrier, heard the commotion and immediately turned around to take a look. The next moment he saw Shangguan Wan, who was rushing over aggressively. Lei Laosi was instantly enraged. Great. I haven't gone to look for them yet, but they all came to me one by one. Lei Laosi stomped his right foot harshly on the ground. The tall and sturdy figure immediately flew into the air. His speed was extremely fast. Only an afterimage was left on the spot, but he had already charged in front of Shangguan Wan. At the same time he drew his bow and shot an arrow. The series of actions was done smoothly and smoothly. Zap. The black arrow instantly flew out. He tore through the air and left. Shangguan had actually been waiting in the nearby woods for quite some time. After she was separated from Elder Qiushi and the rest, she was trapped in the same place with more than 10 black cavalry soldiers and 5 to 6 sect disciples. It was also thanks to them that she was able to escape from that damned place. Of course, after she came out, those people would stay in the dirty and rotten swamp forever. After that, she searched aimlessly in the forest, hoping to find someone who was alone. However, it didn't take long for them to hear the commotion. Looking at the Tianlei falling one after another, what else was there to not understand? She couldn't care less about looking for him and rushed over without stopping. After arriving here, she didn't advance rashly. Instead, she waited in the distance for an opportunity to arrive. From her position, she could see Lei Laosi and the group. She even saw Elder Qiushi and Jiang Yuqing, who came later. However, out of caution, she did not come out and only waited patiently. At times like this, her mind was usually very sharp. Finally, she arrived at the 9th Tianlei. This was the best opportunity and the only opportunity. Because at this time, a 9th grade fiend's defense was the weakest. Hence, she rushed out without hesitation. However, she didn't expect Lei Laosi to be even faster. He actually blocked in front of her. Facing the black arrow that shot towards her glabella, Shangguan's eyes darkened, and she flicked her wrist lightly. A black shield immediately appeared in front of her. Ding! The black arrow hit the black shield harshly and made a crisp sound. The arrow had actually bent directly. On the other hand, that black shield didn't even have a scratch on it. Seeing the black shield that Shangguan suddenly took out, Chu Liyue furrowed his brows slightly. On the other side, Mu Qinghe's expression was slightly cold, and a trace of complicated emotions flashed past the corner of his eyes. He didn't expect Shangguan to actually take this for herself. Shangguan scoffed. It's just a small trick. No matter who you are, get out of the way quickly. If you delay my matters, I won't let you off easily. Dahuang Swamp was also part of the Tianling dynasty's territory, so her identity was still the most honorable here. Normally, those who were tactful would turn pale with fright and move aside humbly. Shangguan looked arrogant as she looked at Lei Laosi high up in the air as though she was looking at an ant. However, the scene in her imagination didn't happen. Not only did Lei Laosi's face not reveal any shock or fear, but he became even more ferocious instead. His gaze swept past the black shield in front of Shangguan, and the fury in his heart almost burst through the sky. There's actually such a shameless person in this world. Was this black shield something that she was worthy of? What is this? How dare you behave atrociously here? He put away the bow and arrows in his hands and replaced them with a hammer. Without another word, he raised it high up. The surrounding heaven and earth force rapidly gathered. His knotted muscles tightened and a vast aura surged around him. He rose crazily. In the end, it stopped at beginner stage 8. Shangguan's heart skipped a beat. This Lei Laosi actually concealed his abilities previously. Beginner stage 8, how can I possibly be his opponent? The two of them were in a stalemate for a moment. At this moment, Chu Liyue was thinking about how to stop Shangguan. Suddenly, a cool breeze brushed past her ears. She was shocked as she saw a red shadow scurrying out directly. It also went straight for that barrier. Dumpling! Chu Liyue shouted, but she couldn't stop Dumpling. She turned around and followed her without thinking. The aftermath of the 9-colored heavenly pheasant breaking through to become a legendary beast was extremely terrifying. Judging from this smell, this 9-colored heavenly pheasant's bloodline power was extremely rich, and it was basically about to break through successfully. With such a horrible bloodline pressure, Tuanzi would be crushed if she went there. Just as Chu Liyue followed her worriedly, Lei Laosi also noticed the situation here. Damn it! Both of them are so restless. If Shangguan wanted to barge into this place, he definitely had to stop her. But what was going on with Chu Liyue? Didn't she want to leave just now? Did she think that she could barge into this barrier safely with her mediocre abilities? Damn girl! Go back. Lei Laosi couldn't hold it in and directly cursed. Seeing that Chu Liyue didn't listen to a single word and rushed over here without stopping, Lei Laosi became even more anxious. Damn it! That Chu Liyue is courting death herself. Why am I so anxious? Lei Laosi despised himself in his heart as he shouted in the other direction, "You're too arrogant. Big brother, do something." Sheng Wanwan saw Chu Luiwei rushing over here, and her lungs were about to explode from anger. How dare a lowly person dream of becoming a legendary beast? Dream on. She grabbed this gap, turned her feet slightly and rushed over from another direction. Chu Luiwei could clearly hear the commotion around her. However, she only wanted to bring Dumpling back. A terrifying shockwave carrying a gorgeous radiance suddenly spread out from the barrier. Chu Luiwei's heart tightened. Dumpling. Poof. Dumpling's body flashed and she actually went into that colorful energy wave. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 708. Tuanzi's figure disappeared in an instant. That energy that was about to reach Chu Luiwei seemed to have been stopped by an invisible hand, and then it quickly retreated. Chu Luiwei looked at the empty space in front of her as well as the barrier with a few faint ripples and was dazed. What's going on? Not only did Dumpling disappear but the energy that was halfway dispersed could actually be retracted. Chu Luiwei closed her eyes and took a closer look to confirm that she didn't see wrongly. Everything that happened just now was real. Dumpling actually barged in unscathed? She saw clearly that when Dumpling went in she indeed didn't suffer any threat or harm. Seemed like she went in naturally. As though she entered a place where there was no one. But standing here, Chu Luiwei could still clearly feel the valiant suppression from the boundary. Why did it have to be Dumpling? Right at this moment Chu Luiwei suddenly felt a force surrounding her. She furrowed her brows and wanted to counterattack immediately. But the moment she was about to make a move she suddenly realized something and turned her head to look. A man stood in the forest over there. That man was tall and his shoulders were straight. Like Lei Laosi, he was wearing a coarse hemp garment. He looked to be around 30 years old and had an ordinary appearance. He was the kind that absolutely couldn't be recognized in a crowd. At this moment he was looking at Chu Luiwei. To be precise, he was looking at the spot in front of Chu Luiwei where Dumpling disappeared. His long and narrow eyes were slightly deep, like a deep and quiet well that didn't have any ripples. Chu Luiwei's heart suddenly skipped a beat. This man's gaze seems a little familiar. This should be the big brother that Lei Laosi mentioned? That man waved his sleeves and Chu Luiwei's body moved uncontrollably. In the blink of an eye she was a few steps away from that man. Then that force disappeared quietly. The two of them faced each other. Chu Luiwei's heart trembled. This man's ability was definitely not weaker than Lei Laosi and might even be above him. Who exactly were these two people? Why were they guarding a 9-colored heavenly pheasant in this desolate and dangerous mystic forest Lin Jihong? From the color of the 9-colored heavenly pheasant's wings, she could tell that it was extremely powerful. There was no need for these two people to stand guard here. Even if it was to ensure sufficient safety when it broke through to become a divine beast, as long as the 9-colored heavenly pheasant gave the order, countless magical beasts would swarm over. Why did they have to pick two humans? Although these two people were indeed very strong, judging from the current situation, these two men were not the master of the 9-colored heavenly pheasant. Whether it was from the perspective of the 9-colored heavenly pheasant or the two of them, this matter was very strange. While Chu Luiwei was thinking about these things in her heart, the man opposite her was also quietly sizing her up. "That blood ferret is your contracted magical beast?" he asked in a calm and slightly hoarse voice. Chu Luiwei nodded. Who wouldn't be able to tell? Was there a need to ask? When that man heard that, his long and narrow eyes squinted, and dark waves surged in the bottom of his eyes. Chu Luiwei felt that something was amiss. This man seems to be looking at my face? What's so good about my face? Chu Luiwei wouldn't think that a person who could reach such a level of ability was swayed by her appearance. He seemed to be looking at another person through her. "That magical beast of yours is a little interesting." He suddenly laughed and said. Chu Luiwei couldn't figure out what he meant at that moment. In the end she simply looked up and met his eyes. "What exactly do you want to ask? Feel free to speak your mind." That man raised his brows slightly as if he didn't expect Chu Luiwei to be so direct. He suddenly raised his hand. Chu Luiwei's expression changed slightly. For some reason, although she knew that this man was very strong to the point that he could kill her with one hand, she didn't feel threatened or uneasy at all. It was as if She was inexplicably certain that he wouldn't hurt her. She had always been a cautious person, and under normal circumstances she definitely wouldn't have such feelings towards a stranger who suddenly appeared. Chu Liwei looked into his eyes and a white light flashed across her mind. Wait. Could this man be? Even the two of us can't enter this spirit formation. The man in front of her suddenly spoke as his hand brushed past Chu Liue's ear and pointed behind her. Boom. The sound of a violent collision was suddenly heard. Chu Liwei suppressed the thoughts in her mind and turned around to look. Lei Laosi had blocked Shang Guanwan again. The two of them fought hand to hand. They fought head-on. Shang Guanwan was in front, but Lei Laosi was stronger, so the two of them ended up in a draw. Of course, Shang Guanwan wasn't as strong as him, so she quickly fell into a disadvantage and was defeated by Lei Laosi. If it weren't for her black shield, she wouldn't have been able to take it anymore. Seeing that she couldn't take it anymore, Shang Guanwan hurriedly turned around and asked Mu Qinghe and Elder Qiushi for help. Vice Admiral Mu. Elder Qiushi. What are you waiting for? Quickly come and help me. Elder Qiushi only hesitated for a moment and immediately planned to go forward. But just as he took a step forward, a bright light suddenly flashed in front of him. Something brushed past the tip of his nose and fell. A fiery pain came and Elder Qiushi instinctively took a step back. Tut. He looked down and saw a palm-sized metal piece piercing into the ground in front of his feet. If it was slightly wrong, his feet would be in trouble. Elder Qiushi was drenched in cold sweat. It's just an abandoned metal piece and it has such power. This man's ability is terrifying. Behind Elder Qiushi, Jiang Yuqing was sitting cross-legged. He was regulating his breathing and waited for the excruciating pain in his abdomen to dissipate before he simply dealt with the injuries on his body. The force in his body was also smoothed out smoothly, and he recovered a portion of his ability. Seeing Shang Guanwan coming over, he was a little unhappy, but he didn't show it. He was planning to go forward with Elder Qiushi when he encountered this attack head-on. Jiang Yuqing stood up and looked at the man who suddenly appeared, and his brows gradually furrowed. There are only a handful of people with such abilities in the Tianling dynasty. Who exactly is this person? Boom, boom, boom. An earth-shattering sound came from within the barrier. The last circle of colorful light at the top was rapidly fading away. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the huge barrier finally became completely transparent. The huge and sturdy Wan Yeshan was as tall as a canopy. A beautiful and incomparably noble 9-colored heavenly pheasant was standing on top of it. It was like a dazzling ray of light in the sky. It was very luxurious and its aura was astonishing. There were some charred wounds on its body that were rapidly recovering. Its aura was also rapidly rising. It was about to break through to become a divine beast. Suddenly, the 9-colored heavenly pheasant slowly lowered its head and looked at Chu Liwei. Chu Liwei seemed to have sensed something and looked up. Their eyes met. Chu Liue's heart skipped a beat. A shout almost jumped out from his throat. Little Jiu. Digression, my eyes are so dry. Oh, I'm not going to update today. I'll update at 12 tomorrow. I'll update depending on the situation. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 709. Even though time and space had changed, Chu Liwei could still recognize the 9-colored heavenly pheasant when she saw it. It was little Nine who had accompanied her for countless days and nights. This was an absolute tacit understanding. It was an intuition that could only be formed after experiencing countless life and death situations together. Chu Liwei clenched her fists tightly and her knuckles turned white. Her heart paused for a short while before it started to beat violently. The blood in her body also started to boil. She didn't know how much effort she had spent to restrain her impulse to go forward. However, her eyes were already sour as if something had suddenly surged up and surrounded her. Little Nine. That's my little Nine. She thought they were separated by life and death. She didn't expect to meet it again in this place. The disappointment and regret from before had all disappeared. What was left was endless surprise and joy. It was as if a flower had suddenly bloomed under the dust and was swaying with the wind. With just a slight movement, all the pain and hardships instantly became insignificant. Chu Liwei didn't even blink as she was afraid that everything in front of her was just an illusion. Suddenly her gaze stopped and she saw that little Nine's eyes were actually gray. Chu Liyue was stunned on the spot. That's not right, Little Nine's eyes were usually black. When it used its power, it would change into a gorgeous color. It was never gray. Most importantly, there were no pupils in this pair of gray eyes. At first glance, they looked like two pieces of gray stone without any spirituality. Although it was also looking at Chu Liyue, only Chu Liyue, who was looking at it, could see that the pair of eyes was actually like a dry well. It was lonely and empty without any emotions. After a moment, it calmly retracted its gaze. Chu Liyue's lips moved slightly and she almost couldn't control herself as she took a step forward. Whoosh! The 9-colored heavenly pheasant suddenly flapped its wings. The wind shook. The leaves rustled. A violent gale spread out in all directions. The people standing nearby were all affected by the shockwave and were forced to retreat. Chu Liyue wanted to go forward but was pulled back by the man behind her. On the other side, Lei Laosi and Shangguan, who were fighting, also separated. Lei Laosi wasn't paying attention and fell to the ground from the impact. He couldn't help but curse. F***ck. You're heartless. I've worked so hard to protect you. Why don't you go easy on me? But that 9-colored heavenly pheasant turned a deaf ear as if it didn't hear him. It seemed to be angry because the people around it disturbed its breakthrough. Lei Laosi instantly felt a headache. I must be crazy to tell it this. If it listened to his advice, why would he and Big Brother need to watch over it? Previously, it had spent most of its time sleeping. It didn't cause any trouble and it was fine as long as it was quiet. Now it was about to break through and its abilities increased, its strength was changed. Not to mention Lei Laosi, even he was too. But it was because it was broken, it was because it did it. She used that black shield to block in front of her in a moment of desperation, and it almost blocked most of the power. So she didn't fall to the ground pathetically like Lei Laosi. She staggered a few steps and barely managed to stand up. She let out a sigh of relief, thinking that the black shield was much more useful than she had imagined. If it wasn't for this thing, she would have died a long time ago. Shangguan looked up at the 9-colored heavenly pheasant again and furrowed her brows. Why did it have to be the 9-colored heavenly pheasant? Previously, she was filled with all sorts of fantasies about this 9th-grade fiend, but she didn't expect it to be the 9-colored heavenly pheasant. If it were any other 9th-grade fiend, she wouldn't have any problems. Except for this 9-colored heavenly pheasant. This was Shangguan Yu's fiend when she was alive. This made Shangguan feel a little uncomfortable. But she couldn't care so much now. Taking advantage of the fact that this thing hadn't completely broken through to become a legendary fiend was the best way to do it. Shangguan burned the force in her body crazily, tapped her toes and flew up again. She went straight for the 9-colored heavenly pheasant. As long as she plucked out the red feathers on its head, she could subdue it and become its master. The 9-colored heavenly pheasant tilted its head and glanced at Shangguan. Just as it was about to attack again, its vision suddenly landed on the black shield in front of Shangguan. There was a moment of hesitation in its actions. Shangguan was elated. This 9-colored heavenly pheasant doesn't seem to be so hostile towards me. Or perhaps its brain hasn't turned around yet and it actually allowed me to get close to it. Perhaps the heavens are destined to let me obtain a legendary fiend. Shangguan was agitated, and because of her excitement, the corners of her eyes were red. In the blink of an eye, she was already in front of that barrier. Ripples suddenly appeared on the transparent barrier. A terrifying aura gradually gathered and condensed into a wave that spread towards Shangguan. Shangguan had witnessed how powerful this barrier was, so she raised the black shield with lingering fear and completely hid her body behind it. Buzz! The shockwave slammed heavily into the black shield. It let out a distant and heavy sound that spread far and wide. The 9-colored heavenly pheasant looked over here and still stared at the black shield closely. It tilted its head slightly and seemed to be thinking about something. That terrifying power shook Shangguan's arms that were holding onto the black shield until they were completely numb. Just as she was worried about what she should do next, she suddenly felt that heavy pressure disappear. She looked up and saw that the ripple was flowing along the black shield to both sides. An entrance suddenly appeared on the barrier. My chance is here. Shangguan was elated and immediately rushed into that entrance without thinking. Lei Laosi was so angry that his liver hurt when he saw this scene. Does this dumb thing know who that is? Why did it become so dumb after waking up from its sleep? Is it blind? Chu Liyue's heart seemed to be stirred by something. Shangguanwan clearly relied on that black shield to be able to go over. Little Nine didn't seem to remember her anymore, but it still had an inexplicable longing for her things. Chu Liyue clenched her teeth and also rushed over. This time, the man beside her didn't stop her and just stood with his hands behind his back as he watched Chu Liyue rush over. His long and narrow eyes squinted slightly as if he was in deep thought. Chu Liyue was too fast and actually followed Shangguanwan into that entrance. Lei Laosi exclaimed. "Stupid girl, you're crazy. Come out quickly. That isn't a place that she can enter." Chu Liyue didn't turn back. She looked up at the 9-colored heavenly pheasant. The 9-colored heavenly pheasant also noticed her arrival. It flapped its wings and a rainbow-colored stream of light wrapped around Chu Liyue tightly like a rope. Shangguanwan turned back and scoffed. "You're overestimating yourself." Chu Liyue felt as if her organs were being squeezed together harshly. She couldn't breathe and her face rapidly flushed red. Her vision also turned black. However, she only looked at the 9-colored heavenly pheasant stubbornly. The 9-colored heavenly pheasant seemed to sense something and finally looked over again. Chu Liyue's nose felt sour, but there was a smile at the corner of her lips. She opened her mouth and said silently, "Little Nine, it's me. Little Nine, it's me." Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 710. Xiaoju, it's me. There wasn't any sound. Just this silent sentence was enough to shake the heavens and earth. The 9-colored heavenly pheasant's gray eyes seemed to crack instantly. A trace of shock surged out from its eyes. The colorful flowing light that was tightening around Chu Liyue suddenly stopped. She looked up at it. That pair of eyes that were as calm as an ancient well finally had some ripples. Confusion, astonishment, shock, disbelief. Many complicated emotions surged up one after another. They intertwined together. Right at this moment, a red furry figure quietly scuttled up the tree trunk and arrived beside the 9-colored heavenly pheasant's red claws. It turned around and saw that Chu Liyue was still trapped in that colorful flowing light. Dumpling gritted her teeth angrily and bit the red claws next to her. The 9-colored heavenly pheasant was in pain. It lowered its head and looked at Dumpling innocently. Dumpling bared her teeth fiercely. The 9-colored heavenly pheasant lowered its head, feeling wronged. Shangguanwan originally wanted to watch a good show, but she realized that the 9-colored heavenly pheasant suddenly stopped. She turned around and followed its line of sight. Then she saw the blood ferret beside the 9-colored heavenly pheasant's feet. Shangguanwan frowned. Isn't that Chu Liyue's fiend? How did it barge in and get so close to the 9-colored heavenly pheasant? Isn't it afraid of the bloodline suppression? And it actually dared to bite the 9-colored heavenly pheasant. Trying to break a rock with an egg. You're courting death. Shangguanwan sneered. Sure enough, like master, like magical beast. Chu Liyue was someone who didn't care about her life, and her fiend was even more so. Just like that, the 9-colored heavenly pheasant could easily crush it to death. Sensing Shangguanwan's gaze as if she was looking at a joke, Dumpling immediately glared back fiercely. What are you looking at? I'll even bite myself when I'm crazy. Chu Liyue also saw Dumpling. When did it run over there? She was planning to call Dumpling back, but she saw that the 9-colored heavenly pheasant had already flapped its wings and used a colorful ball to surround Dumpling. Dumpling floated up gently. In the end, it actually reached the top of the 9-colored heavenly pheasant's head. Chu Liyue frowned and shook her head at the 9-colored heavenly pheasant. Can't do that. Dumpling is also her fiend. The 9-colored heavenly pheasant glanced at Chu Liyue before it directly opened its beak and swallowed the colorful ball. Then it slowly closed its eyes. Dumpling. Chu Liyue exclaimed to Dumpling. Xiaoju really ate Tuanzi? Shangguanwan watched from the side, feeling happy. Sheet to chew of it to choose it heavenly heavens to be two of her to be to her twos to be to the bee. Young Mistress Chu, the inside of this barrier is the 9-colored heavenly pheasant's territory. Ordinary people can't enter. Your fiend is just a third-grade blood ferret. How can it withstand the 9-colored heavenly pheasant's suppression? As I see it, you should quickly leave as well. Otherwise, even I might not be able to protect you. Chu Luiwei glanced at her coldly. Shangguanwan was indeed Shangguanwan. She could still show such fake concern at such a time. Didn't she find it disgusting? Chu Luiwei took a deep breath and realized that the connection between her and Dumpling hadn't been cut off, which meant that it was still alive. She felt more at ease. Dumpling wasn't an ordinary blood ferret. Since it dared to come here, it definitely had the ability to protect itself. Why don't I call Little Nine back and ask it to spit out Dumpling? Chu Luiwei asked plainly. It seems like Third Princess is confident in subduing this 9-colored heavenly pheasant? Shangguanwan's eyes were filled with unconcealable delight. That 9-colored heavenly pheasant obviously treated her differently. It might have already chosen her as its master. It was naturally different from others. Contracting a fiend, especially a high-grade fiend or even a divine beast, depends on fate. Since this 9-colored heavenly pheasant has chosen me, then... Boom. A shocking aura suddenly exploded from the 9-colored heavenly pheasant's body. Gorgeous red flowing light spread out from its feathers and quickly healed the scars caused by Tianlei. At the same time, the 9-colored heavenly pheasant suddenly flapped its wings and flew up. It spread its wings and its body was so huge that it almost covered the sky. In the next moment, it changed its direction and flew towards Shangguanwan. Shangguanwan was nervous and happy. Is it going to recognize me as its master? Her heart thumped and the blood in her body flowed rapidly as though it was about to boil. The 9-colored heavenly pheasant. Once it breaks through, it will become a divine beast. By then, everyone in the Tianling dynasty will know that she, Shangguanwan, has contracted a divine beast. Shangguanyu is so powerful, but didn't she only contract a 9th-grade fiend? As long as today's matter is successful, everyone will know that I, Shangguanwan, am 100 times stronger than Shangguanyu. Countless scenes appeared in Shangguanwan's mind, causing her to tremble in excitement. She took a step forward. As long as I can contract swoosh. The 9-colored heavenly pheasant swooped down, stuck close to Shangguanwan and flew over her head. At the same time, its sharp claws scratched Shangguanwan's arm. Blood flowed from the wound, and it was so deep that her bones could be seen. Shangguanwan was caught off guard. She exclaimed and uncontrollably took a few steps back. She looked at her arm in a panic, but she didn't have time to check her injury. That was because the black shield had been snatched away. Shangguanwan hurriedly looked up and saw that the black shield was being held tightly by the 9-colored heavenly pheasant. She was about to chase after it when she suddenly felt a sharp pain on her arm. She lowered her head and her eyes immediately widened in horror. She saw a few streaks of colorful flowing light at the edge of the scratches. The colorful flowing light looked gorgeous and magnificent, but in fact, it was wrapped in a terrifyingly high temperature. When it swam back and forth, it was as though it was being roasted by flames. What was even more terrifying was that Shangguanwan realized that her wound was expanding at a speed visible to the naked eye. The wound that was already deep enough to see the bone was continuously torn apart by the 9-colored heavenly pheasant's power. Intense pain came and Shangguanwan's mind went blank from the pain and she almost fainted. Ah! She screamed hysterically and fell to the ground, curling up into a ball in extreme pain. No, no. A muffled moan came out of her mouth and it was filled with deep fear. No one knew that the force in Shangguanwan's body was being devoured crazily. And that colorful flowing light had already spread to her shoulders. Looking from afar, both of her arms were already festering and it was very terrifying. Chu Luiwei looked at her and narrowed her eyes. The 9-colored heavenly pheasant's attack just now was a mixture of its and Tianlei's power. Shangguanwan naturally couldn't withstand it. She looked up at the 9-colored heavenly pheasant that was flying in circles in the sky. Little Nine was targeting Shangguanwan like this. Could it be that it thought of something? Right at this moment, the 9-colored heavenly pheasant suddenly let out a clear cry. Screech. The clear and melodious cry resounded throughout heaven and earth. One of the colorful feathers on its wings suddenly transformed into a scarlet red color. Chu Luiwei suddenly felt as though something in her body had been stirred up. A moment later, a tinge of shock flashed across her eyes. That was Dumpling's aura. Digression. The rest of the third night watch will be updated at 6:00 p.m. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 711. Chu Liyue almost couldn't believe it. She checked again carefully and realized that Dumpling's aura was indeed changing along with the changes on the 9-colored heavenly pheasant's body. A bold and absurd thought suddenly appeared in Chu Liyue's mind. Could it be that Dumpling in Little 9? Gradually the colorful feathers turned crimson red. It was like a burning flame that swept across. Chu Liyue couldn't be more familiar with such a red color, because it was exactly the same color as Dumpling's body. Recalling the scene where Dumpling was wrapped in a ball and swallowed by the 9-colored heavenly pheasant, Chu Liyue's eyes flickered and her emotions fluctuated. As the crimson colors appeared, the 9-colored heavenly pheasant's aura also rose crazily. Under the dark sky it was the most dazzling existence. Chu Liyue looked up and countless scenes flashed across her mind. The first time she saw Dumpling was in the forest outside the imperial city. It came out from a pile of fallen leaves and seemed to have slept for a long time. It followed her while swaying. She didn't plan to bring a blood ferret with her at first. However, it was very persistent and stuck to her like a little tail. Then she met the black flying python. Dumpling blocked in front of her without hesitation. Even though its small body was not even as big as one of the black flying python's eyes, it still rushed forward. It didn't care about anything else and charged forward. It was covered in wounds, but it never regretted it. After that, they accompanied each other day and night, and they followed each other through life and death. Speaking of which, it could be summarized in 2 or 3 sentences. However, only she knew how much was involved and what kind of meaning it had. She didn't feel it back then, but now that she thought about it, there were traces everywhere. In this world, how could there be a magical beast that would willingly give up its life for a complete stranger without any scruples? It often slacked off and acted coquettishly, liked to fight with the red demon. It trusted and relied on her completely. Chu Liyue couldn't help but laugh, but the corners of her eyes were wet. A teardrop silently slid down her cheek and disappeared into her hair. The aura that kept increasing in her body was unfamiliar yet familiar. It was Dumpling. It was also Little 9. After going around in circles, it had always been by her side. No. Shangguanwan tossed and turned in pain and kept moaning in pain. Third princess. Everyone outside the barrier also saw the situation here. They all fell into a great shock and were silent for a long time. Shangguanwan's cry of pain finally made them come back to their senses. Elder Qiushi hurriedly rushed over. If he really couldn't explain himself. However, as soon as he reached the barrier, he ran into a dilemma. How was he going to get in there? Shangguanwan and Chu Liyue could only enter because an entrance appeared on the barrier. But now the entrance was sealed. The huge transparent barrier glowed faintly and had an extremely strong aura. With his current strength, it was impossible for him to force his way in. He looked at Mu Qinghe, who was standing at the side, and didn't say much. Vice Admiral Mu, do you have a way to enter this barrier? The third princess is in a bad situation. If we don't save her as soon as possible, I'm afraid. Mu Qinghe was looking at the 9-colored heavenly pheasant in the barrier and frowned. This 9-colored heavenly pheasant. It didn't look like that one, but why did he feel an inexplicable sense of familiarity? Hearing Elder Qiushi's words, he turned his gaze and thought for a moment. He said in a deep voice, even if we work together, it should be very difficult to open this barrier. Unless that 9-colored heavenly pheasant is willing to let us in. He was close and saw clearly just now that Shangguanwan could go in because the barrier was opened by herself. Elder Qiushi was very anxious. Then what should we do? Could it be that we are just going to watch and do nothing? Jiang Yuqing pursed his lips. Suddenly, Jiang Yuqing's voice came from behind. Ask Chu Liyue. Elder Qiushi and Mu Qinghe turned around at the same time. Eldest young master, you mean? Elder Qiushi was confused. After this period of rest, Jiang Yuqing had more or less recuperated his body. He lifted his chin. Didn't Chu Liyue go in too? But eldest young master, she just took advantage of the situation and followed the third princess in. Why, that 9-colored heavenly pheasant hasn't launched a fatal attack on her until now. Isn't that enough to explain the problem? Jiang Yuqing glanced at Elder Qiushi coldly. Elder Qiushi was stunned and immediately understood. That's right. Although Chu Liyue's fiend was eaten by that 9-colored heavenly pheasant, she was still standing there perfectly fine. Other than the time when the 9-colored heavenly pheasant attacked her at the very beginning, it seemed to have treated her as if she was invisible. And the only time it attacked her, it didn't cause any substantial damage to Chu Liyue. Instead it was Shangguan. He thought that she could form a contract, but he didn't expect her to lose half of her life in the blink of an eye. After understanding this, Elder Qiushi finally understood Jiang Yuqing's intention. However, he was still in a difficult position. Eldest young master, you might not know this, but that Chu Liyue is stubborn and has some opinions about me. He definitely wouldn't get any results if he went to ask. The last general can just go. Mu Qinghe suddenly spoke. Jiang Yuqing nodded. Elder Qiushi secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Mu Qinghe turned around and walked toward Chu Liyue. Actually, other than that barrier, the distance between the two of them wasn't considered far. However, to Mu Qinghe, her legs seemed to be filled with lead, and each step was heavier than the previous one. There seemed to be a huge rock pressing down on his heart, making him unable to breathe. His mind was in a mess. 9-colored heavenly pheasant. Is that 9-colored heavenly pheasant? Lei Laosi didn't feel good after seeing Chu Liyue enter with Shangguan. He and Big Brother had guarded this place for so many days and nights, but they couldn't enter this barrier. Yet those two entered so easily. How can this be? However, when he had nowhere to vent his anger and even started to consider quitting, he saw that 9-colored heavenly pheasant attacking Shangguan. Seeing Shangguan lying on the ground with her arms festering in pain, Lei Laosi finally vented his anger. Great. Right now Big Brother and I still can't do anything to Shangguan and the rest openly, but who can object to this 9-colored heavenly pheasant attacking? I didn't watch over you for nothing. Lei Laosi felt good as his gaze landed on Chu Liyue again. That's strange. Why is this girl completely fine? He looked at his big brother and was about to ask for his opinion when he saw him staring at Chu Liyue with an obscure gaze. Lei Laosi's heart skipped a beat and he limped over. Big brother, what are you thinking about? That man's lips slowly curled up. I'm thinking that we shouldn't continue to wait. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 7:12. Lei Laosi was stunned as he looked at him in disbelief. What? Big brother, you mean? Immediately after, Lei Laosi suddenly thought of something and quickly looked up. Right. The 9-colored heavenly pheasant only started to transform into a legendary beast after swallowing that blood ferret. Could it be Chu Liyue? Lei Laosi turned his gaze and looked at the young lady in red standing inside the barrier. She was slender and her shoulders were thin, but her back was very straight. The wind and clouds moved around her, but she stood proudly as though nothing in this world could make her bend her back. He suddenly recalled Chu Liyue's gaze when she said that she wanted to enter the barrier. So determined. So persistent. So unparalleled. That blood ferret was her contracted fiend, and from what she said, it was indeed that blood ferret that brought them here. The most important thing was that the 9-colored heavenly pheasant had already tried to kill Shangguan, but it didn't hurt Chu Liyue at all. With so many clues added together, it was enough to prove one thing. Chu Liyue, Lei Laosi was agitated and his hand that was holding the hammer trembled slightly. As he stared at Chu Liyue's figure, he tried his best to control his emotions and lowered his voice. Big brother, are you sure? This is a serious matter, so I have to be very careful. That man's smile deepened slightly. Just watch. Lei Laosi's heart was scratching. What do you mean by, just watch? Is it true or not? Give me a definite answer. But that man wasn't willing to say anything else. Lei Laosi could only restrain himself. No matter what the result was, he just had to wait for the 9-colored heavenly pheasant to complete its breakthrough. Mu Qinghe walked to the front of the barrier. The turbulent and powerful suppression was like a small mountain pressing down on his body, making it difficult for him to take every step forward. Even the force circulation in his body slowed down. But he still got close to where Chu Liyue was. Before he could speak, Chu Liyue turned around as though she sensed something. Her eyes were bright, clean, and deep like black jade. Mu Qinghe choked on his words. How did you go in? Chu Liyue raised her brows slightly. Didn't Vice Admiral Mu see everything that happened just now? I followed the third princess in. Mu Qinghe paused for a moment and said straightforwardly, do you have a way to help us go in? Or, You can send the third princess out. Anyone could tell that it was impossible for Shangguan to subdue this 9-colored heavenly pheasant. Moreover, it was about to break through to become a divine beast. By then it's Qinghe. She's Qinghe. Chu Luiyue glanced at Shangguan, knitted her brows and hesitated. This, Lieutenant Mu, do you think that I have such an ability? You probably forgot that my fiend was also swallowed by the 9-colored heavenly pheasant. I can't even go out now, so I naturally don't know how to send the third princess out. Why should I send her out? Isn't it good for her to stay here? Shangguan is greedy. She wants to occupy the 9-colored heavenly pheasant, but she didn't think about where she got the right to do so. Mu Qinghe's expression was solemn. Is there really no way? Chu Luiyue suddenly laughed. I couldn't tell that Vice Admiral Mu is really loyal to the third princess. Mu Qinghe's heart suddenly felt like it was stabbed by something. But I'm very sorry. I really don't have this ability. Why don't you ask those two? Mu Qinghe knew that Chu Luiyue was talking about Lei Laosi and the other two. Not to mention whether they would help even if they were willing, those two probably wouldn't be able to do it. Otherwise, Lei Laosi wouldn't be in such a sorry state just now. Screech. A clear screech was heard once again. Chu Luiyue immediately turned back to take a look. Currently, half of the feathers on the 9-colored heavenly pheasant had already turned crimson red. Splash! Its huge wings suddenly vibrated. In an instant the wind and clouds surged. The huge Wan Yeshan swayed with the wind. Pick! An incomparably thick tree root suddenly rose up from the ground. It slammed toward Shangguan. This tree was the biggest tree in the entire Mystic Sun Forest, and its root naturally couldn't be underestimated. That tree root was so thick that it would take 2 people to wrap their arms around it. Also, it was crystal clear and filled with blood-red liquid. A strong smell of blood spread across the place. Everyone's expression changed simultaneously. Needless to say, Jiang Yuqing and the rest had personally experienced how powerful this tree root was. Third princess. That tree root was about to land on Shangguan. At this moment, Shangguan suddenly seemed to have realized something and looked up. When she saw that thick tree root flying toward her, fear flashed across Shangguan's face. Immediately after, she seemed to have made up her mind, and a ruthless glint flashed across her eyes. I can't care so much anymore. The next moment, Shangguan's aura suddenly surged. She quickly got up and left an afterimage on the spot. Bang! That tree root ruthlessly slammed onto the spot where Shangguan was just now. Countless cracks instantly spread out on the ground. A deep gully appeared in a split second. Shangguan's afterimage was also instantly shattered. However, she was still able to avoid this attack. Chu Luiyue immediately looked over and his eyes narrowed dangerously. Shangguan's aura was actually still surging rapidly. She was only at peak stage 7 just now, but she actually broke through to stage 8 right now. She reached the same stage as Lei Laosi. A chilly aura emanated from Shangguan's body. In an instant, her face and body were actually covered with a thin layer of frost. Shangguan indeed still held back previously. Just as Chu Luiyue was thinking, he saw Shangguan raise her hand. A sharp white icicle suddenly appeared in her hand. However, in the center of that white icicle, there seemed to be a drop of crimson blood. The terrifying aura was emanating from that drop of blood. Chu Luiyue's heart shuddered. That blood was swoosh. Shangguan had already taken action. She ruthlessly stabbed that icicle into the tree root in front of her. Then she slashed it forcefully. Rip! Blood splattered everywhere. Shangguan's face and body were instantly covered with scarlet bloodstains. Looked eerie and terrifying. However, an even more terrifying scene appeared next. Those bloodstains that splattered on the icicle were actually rapidly absorbed by the icicle. All of them gathered into that drop of blood in the center. From afar, the color of that drop of blood in the center seemed to have become even denser, and it even faintly turned black. Shangguan happened to be holding on to the center of that icicle, so this scene was only seen by Chu Luiyue, who was standing nearby. Chu Luiyue only felt a chill run up from the bottom of his feet. There's something wrong with that icicle. Her gaze shifted slightly and she looked at Shangguan again. However, she shockingly discovered that her injuries were recovering at a speed visible to the naked eye. Mobile users, please browse and read. A more high-quality reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 713. At this moment Shangguanwan completely ignored the gazes of the outside world. She held the icicle and looked at the blood-red liquid flowing all over the roots in front of her. She was pleasantly surprised. The thick smell of blood spread and it was nauseating. However, this smell made Shangguanwan even more excited. This one Yeshan indeed lives by consuming human blood. The biggest one in the middle should be the mother tree of all the Wan Yeshan in the mystic forest. If I control this one Yeshan, doesn't that mean all those people who are still trapped underground will be mine? This would be many times more convenient than my previous plan. Screech. A painful shriek was heard. Chu Liwei quickly looked up and saw that the remaining half of the 9-colored heavenly pheasant's feathers didn't turn red for a long time. Even the parts that had turned red started to turn back to their original colors. Chu Liue's heart sank harshly. Could this be the sign of a failed breakthrough? It hovered in midair and flapped its wings anxiously. Chu Liwei clearly saw that the red color on one of its wings that had just transformed was gradually fading. The most important thing was that the rolling dark clouds in the sky were also showing signs of dissipating and were gradually drifting in all directions. Even if Chu Liwei hadn't seen the scene of a 9th-grade fiend breaking through to a mythical beast, he knew one thing. Under normal circumstances, the phenomenon would only disappear after a successful breakthrough. But now, the 9-colored heavenly pheasant was only halfway through its breakthrough and it actually started. This could only prove that Chu Liue's guess wasn't wrong. He didn't know what problem the 9-colored heavenly pheasant encountered, but it was stuck at this last stage. If it couldn't successfully break through to become a mythical beast this time, the 9-colored heavenly pheasant's abilities would decrease greatly. There was even a possibility that it wouldn't be able to break through to become a mythical beast in this lifetime. Chu Liue's heart sank to the bottom of the valley. Big brother, what's going on? Is that fellow going to fail? The others below also noticed that something was amiss and their expressions changed. A hint of panic flashed past Lei Laoxi's eyes as he looked at his big brother. How could this be? For such a long time, we have been watching carefully, not leaving each other's side at all. There have been no mistakes at all. Logically speaking, it should be able to succeed. One must know that the 9-colored heavenly pheasant had been in a deep slumber for close to 2 years. It was its own choice to break through to divine beast today. If it didn't have absolute confidence, it wouldn't have done that. Nothing is absolute. The man's expression was calm as his long and narrow eyes narrowed slightly. The probability of a 9th-grade magical beast successfully breaking through to become a divine beast is actually less than half. Besides, moreover, this 9-colored heavenly pheasant was very different from other 9th-grade magical beasts. Lei Laoxi was speechless and his face was a little pale. But, this is that person's magical beast. How could her magical beast fail? Back then, the fact that it was able to survive in such a desperate situation was already enough to explain many things. At the very least, he had never thought of a second possibility other than success. Let's wait and see. The dark clouds haven't completely dispersed yet. Until then there was still time. Lei Laoxi held the hammer in his hands tightly and looked up anxiously. Anyway, I think it will definitely work, he muttered to himself as if he was convincing himself and also as if it was some kind of firm obsession. But why is the 9-colored heavenly pheasant's color changing back again? Mu Hongyu exclaimed. Yi Ran furrowed his brows and his face was solemn. I'm afraid, not good. How can it be so easy to break through to become a divine beast? You're saying that it's going to fail? Mu Hongyu was still in disbelief. That 9-colored heavenly pheasant was clearly fine just now. Could it be that even such a powerful 9th-grade magical beast couldn't successfully cross that threshold? The golden mane bear cub suddenly appeared in Mu Hongyu's arms again. Mu Hongyu's arms sank and she hurriedly hugged it. Song, what are you doing? She thought that it was frightened by the commotion, but after the golden mane bear cub came out, it just stayed in her arms obediently and looked at the 9-colored heavenly pheasant in the sky with a nervous expression. Mu Hongyu didn't understand what was going on. Why does Song look like? Not only is it not afraid, but it's also very worried about that 9-colored heavenly pheasant? Mu Qinghe also looked up, but he quickly retracted his gaze and looked at Shangguanwan again with a solemn expression. When Shangguanwan attacked just now, there seemed to be something wrong. Your Highness. The moment he spoke, he heard a gust of wind by his ear. A green figure flashed past his eyes rapidly. He was shocked. Hong Yao. Hong Yao turned around and glanced at him, but it didn't stop. Well, green flames quickly ignited on its body. Its aura increased rapidly. Mu Qinghe's expression changed slightly. What is it planning to do? Hong Yao, come back. He scolded sternly. Hong Yao flapped its wings and flew toward the 9-colored heavenly pheasant that was hovering in midair. Mu Qinghe was about to chase after it when he suddenly heard a loud sound. Boom. He turned around and saw that the ground in front of Shangguanwan had suddenly collapsed. The ravine was so deep that the bottom couldn't be seen. Jiang Yuqing also noticed the commotion here. His expression changed drastically and he immediately went forward. At this moment a tree root swept over. Shangguanwan actually jumped down. Your Highness. Wan Fe. Shangguanwan's figure instantly disappeared in front of everyone. So dangerous down there. Why is she still going down? Almost at the same time, Chu Liwei tapped her toes and shot into the sky like an arrow. She was actually going for the 9-colored heavenly pheasant. Lu Yu, Mu Hongyu and the rest were shocked. The 9-colored heavenly pheasant was about to fail its breakthrough, and its aura was already surging. Wasn't she courting death by going over at this moment? Chu Liwei turned a deaf ear to these voices. She suddenly raised her aura and her speed became even faster. At this moment, only the area around the 9-colored heavenly pheasant's head was left red. The rest of its body had turned colorful again. However, although it was colorful, it was very different from the luxurious and beautiful appearance from before. Upon closer inspection, its body seemed to be covered with a layer of dust. Its entire body was gray and lifeless. Chu Liuyue's heart felt as if it was pierced by a sharp blade. It was painful. She gritted her teeth and charged over without a care. The 9-colored heavenly pheasant seemed to have sensed someone approaching and flapped its wings alertly. The fierce and chaotic power transformed into streams of light and scattered in all directions. Many wounds were quickly left on Chu Liuyue's body. However, she was still moving forward. She directly arrived in front of the 9-colored heavenly pheasant. Screech! The 9-colored heavenly pheasant flapped its wings and instantly surrounded Chu Liuyue's figure. A vast and mighty pressure descended. A chilling murderous aura enveloped her. Chu Liuyue's clothes and long black hair fluttered in the wind. The biting cold aura approached and its sharp claws pierced her neck. Dark red blood instantly gushed out. Chu Liuyue's eyes were red, but she was persistent and firm. She said, Xiaojiu, I'm back. You come back too, okay? Her voice was so soft that it could be easily blown away by the wind. However, the 9-colored heavenly pheasant heard it. Its eyes, which had been closed all this time, finally opened. Amidst the dull gray color, a gorgeous colorful light suddenly erupted. Dark clouds gathered in the sky again. Boiling hot and sparkling tears fell from its magnificent eyes. Master summons. My return. Digression. Today is even more over. Tomorrow at 12 a.m. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 7:14. The blood that gushed out from Chu Liuyue's neck was quickly absorbed by the 9-colored heavenly pheasant. The crimson-red claws became even brighter. As though it was suddenly injected with abundant energy, the 9-colored heavenly pheasant let out a clear cry. Screech. This cry was different from the painful cry from before. It was melodious, nostalgic, joyful. It was the joy of finally seeing hope after enduring a long wait. In those countless dark days, it was chaotic, lost, and lonely. Now it could finally meet again. The layer of gray on the 9-colored heavenly pheasant's body quickly faded. The feathers all over its body became bright again. Then a smear of red spread rapidly. Those colorful feathers started to turn red at a speed visible to the naked eye. Only that pair of eyes were like magnificent rainbow-colored crystals, dazzling and brilliant. Dark clouds rolled in the surroundings and the wind whistled. However, the space surrounded by the 9-colored heavenly pheasant's wings was incomparably quiet and peaceful. The vast pressure on Chu Liuyue instantly dissipated. Chu Liuyue suddenly felt something pushing her from behind. It was the 9-colored heavenly pheasant's wings. She was even closer to it. So close that she could see her own reflection in that pair of gem-like eyes. Chu Liuyue slowly stretched out her hand and wiped away its tears. She couldn't be more familiar with that gaze. Stumpling. It's little Nine again. There's Dumpling's coquettish nostalgia and little Nine's unparalleled nobility. Chu Liwei choked and her voice trembled slightly. You're little Nine, and also Dumpling, right? The 9-colored heavenly pheasant lowered its head and leaned close to her cheek, gently rubbing against it. Chu Liwei closed her eyes and hot tears fell silently. Even though she already had some guesses in her heart still couldn't help but tremble when she received a definite answer. She had regained what she had lost. Perhaps there was nothing in the world that could make her feel more fortunate and happy than this. Chu Liu's chest seemed to be filled with something, and surprise and nostalgia almost overflowed from the depths of her heart. It's still here, it's back. She once thought that she had lost everything. But, well, it was still waiting for her. Chu Liuwei opened his bloodshot eyes. The 9-colored heavenly pheasant carefully wiped away the tears on her face. Chu Liuwei looked at it. In an instant many things flashed through his mind. Now that the truth was out, it was as if there was an invisible string that connected all those things together. Dumpling stubbornly brought her here. That colorful barrier. Lei Laosi and the other two in charge of guarding. Chu Liuwei couldn't help but laugh. So it really was the two of them. Previously she didn't dare to believe it. After all, from all aspects, the two of them were too different from before. Even she, who was standing right in front of them, did not dare to confirm their identities. However, since little Jiu was here and Lei Laosi and the rest had been guarding this place, everything was confirmed. Chu Liuwei took half a step back and looked at little Nine. At this moment, only its tail was left on its body, and it hadn't turned red yet. I thought I wouldn't be able to see you again. I didn't expect. Not only can I see you again, but I can also watch you break through. Little Jiu's eyes shone brightly. Suddenly there was a hurried screech behind her. Chu Liuwei turned around and saw that Hong Yao had flown over unknowingly. As Chu Liuwei's body was tightly wrapped in little Jiu's wings, Hong Yao could only fly to the top to look down. Chu Liuwei looked up slightly and saw Hong Yao hovering above anxiously, staring at her closely. She smiled brightly and her eyes were curved. Seeing that Chu Liuwei seemed to be fine, Hong Yao finally heaved a sigh of relief. But then it realized that there was a wound on Chu Liuwei's neck that was just cut open. It was even bloody. Hong Yao widened its eyes instantly and looked at little Jiu furiously. Is this fellow crazy? How could it be so heavy-handed to me? Little Nine and Hong Yao had always disliked each other. Every time they met they would at least fight. But this time it knew it was in the wrong, so it guiltily avoided Red Demon's eyes. The Red Demon was even angrier. It flapped its wings crazily, and its small body was almost curled into a ball. It rushed over without a second thought. It couldn't even bear to hurt a single strand of her hair, but this fellow actually cut her neck. Aha, bang! When the Red Demon hit the barrier it finally stopped. Chu Liuwei was speechless. It seemed that Hong Yao had also seen through little Nine's identity, which was why he was so unforgiving. However, it didn't seem to realize that the current little Nine was even stronger than before. If it continued to fight like this, it would still be the one at a disadvantage. Chu Liuwei coughed and glanced at little Nine. She clearly saw that Red Demon was coming. Couldn't she be gentler? Little Nine looked at her innocently. It's Hong Yao's fault for not paying attention. How can I blame it? Besides, it was still busy trying to break through. Chu Liuwei's eyelids twitched and she had the urge to facepalm. Her intuition told her that the fight between these two wouldn't stop. She looked back again and found that the Red Demon quickly pulled itself together and flew up again. But this time, it just stared at little Nine from outside the barrier and didn't continue to rush over. Suddenly, there seemed to be something moving in Chu Liuwei's dantian. She was stunned. Only then did she realize that this movement seemed to be coming from the Black Pyramid. It was as if something inside was about to break free. The black barrier above seemed to have begun to shake. Chu Liuwei's expression froze. Ever since she obtained this Black Pyramid, it had only produced an obvious movement in the Tianling God realm once. The rest of the time there was no movement. That time it opened the door to the Long Yuan sword. What was it this time? Hoo, boom. Little Nine crazily swallowed the surrounding heaven and earth energy, and the aura on its body continued to rise. The fluctuations were endless. The sound was earth-shattering. Everything within a radius of dozens of miles had been affected by this powerful energy. Crack. An extremely crisp sound was heard. Upon hearing that, Chu Liwei looked up and saw that the top of the barrier suddenly shattered. Numerous cracks instantly crawled all over the transparent barrier like a spider web. This barrier is going to break. Retreat. Lei Laosi, who had been watching the situation closely, immediately yelled when he saw the situation. The man standing beside him moved swiftly. His movements were graceful, and in the blink of an eye, he had retreated quite a distance. At the same time, he waved his sleeves and brought Chong Wanzhou and the other two, who were still rooted to the ground, over. Chong Wanzhou reacted the fastest. He instinctively wanted to draw his sword but shockingly realized that his body couldn't move at all. It wasn't until they were all brought to that man's side that the unknown restraining force on their bodies finally disappeared. The few of them had just stood still, and before they could say anything they saw the transparent barrier shattering. With that tree as the center, a horrifying force crazily engulfed the surroundings. The ground was lifted up continuously. Broken wood and dust scattered everywhere. At the same time, the tail of the 9-colored heavenly pheasant in the sky finally started to transform. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 7:15. When Mu Qinghe heard Lei Laosi's shouts, she immediately retreated and summoned Hong Yao back at the same time. However, it seemed to be at odds with the 9-colored heavenly pheasant as it refused to move. Mu Qinghe frowned and pondered as she blocked the surrounding turbulence. Is Hong Yao acting like this because it's worried about Chu Liwei or because of the 9-colored heavenly pheasant? Other than the one back then, there's almost no one else that can make Hong Yao so persistent. Could it be that it's hostile towards the entire 9-colored heavenly pheasant race? Mu Qinghe didn't dare to confirm her guess. From this position she could vaguely see Chu Liu's sleeves, but she couldn't see anything else. However, judging from the current situation, even though Chu Liu was trapped by the 9-colored heavenly pheasant, he didn't seem to be in much danger for the time being. Jiang Yuqing and Elder Qiushi were both forced to retreat. Because Elder Qiushi was standing in front and was responsible for protecting Jiang Yuqing, he suffered quite a bit of injuries. However, Jiang Yuqing's current feelings were very complicated. Shang Guanwan went underground again. She clearly knew that it was that terrifying black swamp below, so why did she still go down? According to Jiang Yuqing's understanding of Shang Guanwan's character, since she did this, it must be to achieve one of her goals. But what exactly is it? Suddenly, Jiang Yuqing's heart skipped a beat. Could it be that Shang Guanwan is targeting those people trapped under Wan Yeshan? Once this thought popped up, it couldn't be dismissed. Jiang Yuqing clenched his fists and furrowed his brows. Shang Guanwan is definitely capable of doing such a thing. After all, she came here this time for this matter. But she actually gave up on her previous plan and chose this method. Recalling the thick and plump roots that looked like they were filled with blood, Jiang Yuqing's entire body turned numb. However, he was more worried. Jumping down in front of so many people, isn't she afraid of being exposed? He was really crazy. If Shang Guanwan knew what Jiang Yuqing was thinking at this time, she would definitely sneer at him. He wasn't the one whose Yuan meridian was crippled. He wasn't the one who was completely crippled. Of course he couldn't understand her feelings. Moreover, at that time she had already been forced to the point where she had no way out. This was the only path she could take. Even if Shang Guanwan was given another 100 chances, she would still make the same choice. As for whether or not it would be discovered, she had done even more daring things, let alone this. As long as the method was in place, nothing would be a problem. I wonder how the third princess is doing, Elder Qiushi said worriedly. Jiang Yuqing looked up at the sky. Chu Liwei seemed to be trapped by the 9-colored heavenly pheasant. However, the strange thing was that the 9-colored heavenly pheasant was on the verge of failure just now. Its aura was in a frenzy and it had almost lost its rationality. Under that kind of situation, it actually didn't take Chu Liu's life. Moreover, after Chu Liu left, the 9-colored heavenly pheasant somehow regained its strength. Now it was only one step away from success. Now, what exactly happened? Boom, boom, boom. An even stronger wave came. Everyone looked up at the same time. A bright red flame suddenly appeared at the tail of the 9-colored heavenly pheasant. This light was like a knife that tore the dark sky apart. It was dazzling and eye-catching. A terrifying pressure that caused one's heart to palpitate spread out from its body. Everyone was dumbfounded as they tried to explain. That was a phoenix tail. Red-tailed red phoenix. The 9-colored heavenly pheasant had successfully broken through to become a red-tailed red phoenix. Red-tailed red phoenix. Isn't this the existence whose bloodline power is the closest to the crimson gold heavenly phoenix in the rumors? The crimson gold heavenly phoenix was one of the 2 great primordial divine beasts, along with the great void phoenix dragon. Rumor had it that there were many types below the crimson gold heavenly phoenix. Among them, the red-tailed red phoenix was the most noble. The 9-colored heavenly pheasant wasn't considered the top 9th grade fiend in this lineage. Although everyone expected it to break through and become a phoenix, they didn't expect it to jump 3 grades and forcefully become a red-tailed red phoenix. Even Chu Luiyue was stunned. She was full of expectations for Little Nine's breakthrough, but she had never imagined that it could become a red-tailed red phoenix. Back then, before she got into trouble, Little Nine already had signs of breaking through. However, at that time the bloodline power in its body wasn't as dense as it was now. Otherwise, Chu Luiyue wouldn't have mistaken Little Nine's identity after smelling that fragrance. What exactly had it experienced in the past 2 years? One had to know that the bloodline power in a fiend's body was basically fixed from birth. To strengthen it was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Chu Luiyue was sure that if it wasn't for the rich bloodline power in its body, it definitely wouldn't be able to break through and become a red-tailed red phoenix. Countless fragments of the barrier floated over, transforming into streams of light and entering Little Nine's body. It slowly closed its eyes. Chu Luiyue's heart stirred. She suddenly looked up and frowned. The dark clouds in the sky hadn't dispersed yet. What was going on? Little Nine had already successfully broken through. Logically speaking, the clouds should have dispersed. Suddenly, a fluctuation came from Chu Luiyue's dantian. It was that black pyramid. Chu Luiyue immediately focused. Crack. A small crack suddenly appeared on that black seal. That crack was extremely small. If one didn't observe carefully, it would be impossible to notice it. However, Chu Luiyue's heart immediately jumped. The sealing power of this barrier was extremely strong. Back then, even Taizu couldn't open it. Now it actually cracked open by itself. A brilliant light shone out from within. Chu Luiyue held her breath. Then she felt as if something was flowing out from that crack. Chu Luiyue looked carefully and was surprised to find that it was a ball of faint golden mist. After it floated out, before Chu Luiyue could see it clearly, that ball of golden mist quietly dissipated. In an instant it disappeared without a trace. Chu Luiyue was confused. What was that? She still hadn't. Buzz. A huge roar suddenly reverberated in her mind. Chu Luiyue hugged her head. She was in extreme pain. It was as if someone was holding an axe and madly chopping at her head, trying to split it open. Ah! Chu Luiyue cried out in pain. Almost at the same time, the feathers on Little Nine's head flashed with a brilliant golden color. Its wings suddenly flapped. Then the golden light quickly disappeared. It sank into its crimson feathers. Its movements were extremely fast, and all of this happened too suddenly, so no one noticed it at all. Everyone's attention was attracted by Chu Luiyue's cry of surprise. Chu Luiyue hugged her head tightly with both hands. In an instant, countless images flashed through her mind. Finally, one image froze. It was still that cliff. It was still that octagonal pavilion. It was still that man in the black brocade robe. Chu Luiyue's heart suddenly jumped. She seemed to have a premonition. This time, the man turned his face to the side and chuckled in her direction. He was lazy and noble. Come here. Digression, koan is so painful. So slow. There's still 6 chapters left. I don't know if I can add more chapters. Just pretend I didn't say anything. Mobile phone users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 716. His face seemed to be hidden in a cloud of fog and she couldn't see it clearly. That voice also sounded familiar, as though she had heard it somewhere before. Chu Luiyue inexplicably believed that the was calling her. Who is this man? Why is he calling my name? Moreover, it's in such a familiar tone. Chu Luiyue wanted to walk forward uncontrollably, but her body seemed to be trapped on the spot and she couldn't move an inch. There was a distance between the two of them and she couldn't get close to him. That man didn't seem to be in a hurry, and he even extended a hand as though waiting for her to go over. He stood tall and the mountain breeze blew his black clothes. He was like a devil's snare blooming in the dark night, but he was also floating like an immortal. Chu Luiyue opened her mouth wanting to say something, but she couldn't say a single word. There seemed to be a transparent barrier between the two of them and they couldn't get close to each other. You are. Chu Luiyue instinctively knew this man and her chest was filled with an impulse to call out his name. It seemed that as long as she called out his name she could remember who he was. However, Chu Luiyue couldn't call out his name. Her heart gradually became anxious. Suddenly, a golden ray of light floated past her eyes. Chu Luiyue's eyes instantly turned into a golden dazzle. She couldn't see anything clearly. In the next moment, it was as if something had violently tugged at her. Her body fell downwards. Bam! Everything in front of her dissipated with a loud bang. Thousands of miles away, in an elegant and unique attic, a figure was sitting by the window. He had changed back to black clothes today and he looked a little cold. At this moment there was a chessboard in front of him. Opposite him was 36 respected Elder Ming. His slender and fair fingers picked up a white chess piece, and when it was in midair his movements suddenly paused. 36 respected Elder Ming raised his head and looked at the man opposite him strangely. Your Highness. He had always been decisive when playing chess and he would never stop in the middle of a game. It seemed that he was thinking about something. 36 respected Elder Ming was about to ask again when he suddenly saw a golden flame ignite on his fingertip. The flames quickly condensed into half a rune in the air before quickly dissipating. The chess piece between his fingers instantly turned into a wisp of white smoke. It slowly drifted away. 36 respected Elder Ming narrowed his eyes. His Highness actually used such a seal at this time. Your Highness, did something happen? Rong Xiu shook his head and his thin lips raised a light smile. Nothing. It was just that. She had opened the seal on the pyramid faster than he had expected. 36 respected Elder Ming looked at his languid expression, the smile at the corner of his lips, and the faint pampering and pride in his eyes. He could already guess a little. It has something to do with the young princess consort? Rong Xiu smiled, picked up another piece and put it down. Yes. She should be thinking about me. Rong Xiu said calmly and confidently. 36 respected Elder Ming instantly curled his lips in disdain. It was fine if he directly said that he was thinking about his wife, but he had to say that she was thinking about him. How shameless. Your Highness, your skin seems to be getting thicker, 36 respected Elder Ming said impolitely. Rong Xiu's smile deepened. He didn't mind him saying that and only raised his eyebrows. I was just speaking the truth, but I don't know what she was thinking about me. Chu Luiyue suddenly woke up and gasped for air. Her forehead was covered in cold sweat, and her clothes were already drenched in sweat, sticking to her body. It was extremely uncomfortable. A soft touch came over. Chu Luiyue looked up in a daze. It was little Nine who came over with a worried look in her eyes. She seemed to have woken up from a dream. That scene just now. It didn't seem like an illusion but a memory. Chu Luiyue pursed her lips tightly, and a trace of panic appeared in her heart. This memory couldn't possibly belong to Chu Luiyue's body. Then, could it be hers? But in the 20 years of her previous life, she had never had such a memory. Could it be that she had really forgotten something? Chu Luiyue unconsciously clenched her fists. As the breeze blew, her body felt cold. When this scene first appeared, she only thought that it was an illusion. But this time, she could clearly feel that the entire scene had become much clearer. It was as if something that had been sealed for a long time was taken out, and the dust was wiped away, gradually revealing its original appearance. Chu Luiyue rarely had such emotions. She faintly felt that she seemed to have missed out on something important, but she didn't even know it. What made her even more uneasy was that the man in black seemed to be someone very important to her. Chu Luiyue took a deep breath and suppressed the chaotic emotions in her heart. She looked at the black pyramid in her dantian again and found that the tiny crack on it was still there, but the faint glow that was emitted from it had disappeared. At a glance, there seemed to be nothing but darkness under the crack. The seal was indeed broken, but it wasn't completely opened. Chu Liyue tried to shake the seal but found that it was futile. Girl, that crack was split open by the power of the heavenly Tao when you were contracting with this red-tailed phoenix. It won't be that easy for you to open it with your own strength. Taizu's voice suddenly sounded. Chu Liyue was shocked. Contract? Heavenly Tao? You still don't know? This red-tailed phoenix is already your contracted divine beast. When a 9th-grade magical beast breaks through to become a divine beast, the power of the heavenly Tao that it summons is often hidden in the 9th Tianlei. Just now this little guy almost didn't make it through. It was only after contracting with you that it crossed this threshold. And the power of the heavenly Tao naturally divided a portion of it into your body. Chu Liyue's mind raced. Now that she had changed her body, she naturally needed to contract with Little Nine again. Now that she thought about it, it should be when Little Nine used its claws to pierce her neck. It inadvertently succeeded in contracting? Chu Liyue touched her neck. The wound wasn't big, and although Little Nine had almost lost its mind and attacked her, but at the last moment, it seemed to have relied on its instincts to avoid all the fatal points. Now that the wound had coagulated, it would recover after resting for a while. At that time she only wanted to summon Little Nine back and help Little Nine cross the 9th Tianlei. She didn't expect that by a freak combination of factors, she would directly contract with it. It could be seen that the fate between them couldn't be cut off no matter what. The thing in your body received the power of the heavenly Tao and became like this. It's a pity that the power of the seal is too strong, and it seems to have automatically repaired itself. Taizu's voice was somewhat regretful. He had thought that he could take advantage of this opportunity to completely remove the seal. Chu Liyue was silent for a moment, then said firmly, "There will be a day when I will open this seal." Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 717. Then a red light flashed in front of her eyes, and Little Nine's enormous figure rapidly changed and finally became the size of a palm. Its entire body was red, and its tail in particular was like a burning flame that was intense and intense. Its pair of round eyes were extremely gorgeous, like the most precious gemstone, dazzling and eye-catching. Chu Liyue reached out her hand and Little Nine flew into her palm. She didn't blink at all, and her heart was filled with joy and admiration. Although she wasn't sure how Little Nine escaped the pursuit back then, nor did she know how it transformed into Dumpling and found her, but these weren't the most important. It was still here and had returned to her side. That was enough. Chu Liyue pondered for a moment and said in her heart, "Little Nine, I'm afraid I can't call you Little Nine anymore. Why don't I call you Dumpling?" The 9-colored heavenly pheasant's identity was already sensitive enough, and if she called it Little Nine again, it would really be too ostentatious. Anyway, she had already called it Dumpling for so long, and it had always been by her side using this name, so it was most suitable to continue calling it this way. Little Nine nodded seriously and rubbed its head against her palm gently. The furry touch and its extremely obedient appearance made Chu Liyue's heart melt. She said softly, "Dumpling, I'll bring you home." When they saw that the enormous red-tailed phoenix in the sky became the size of a palm, everyone standing below was stunned. Then when they saw it fly onto Chu Liyue's shoulder and the human and beast landed together, everyone was even more confused. In the end, when they saw Chu Liyue patting that red-tailed phoenix's head dotingly and the latter rubbing against her neck like a spoiled child, other than Lei Laosi and the other two who had been guarding, everyone else instantly felt bad. What's going on? Where's the majestic mythical beast? Where's the ferocious red-tailed phoenix? Why did it suddenly become such a tiny thing? Most importantly, it's so intimate with Chu Liyue. Looking at Chu Liyue standing in the middle and the red lump on her shoulder, the surroundings fell into an eerie silence. A gust of wind blew past and only the rustling of leaves could be heard. Chu Liyue looked around and chuckled. "What's wrong with you guys?" This voice was like a stone falling into a calm lake, instantly stirring up countless waves. Lu Yu's name. What's wrong with you? Mu Hongyu widened her almond-shaped eyes as she asked in shock. "Isn't this a mythical beast? Why did it become so small? Also, why is it in you?" After stuttering for a long while, muses of the heavenly pheasant. Chu Liyue. It's probably because it's this big when it's not in combat form. But I'm not very sure. Before Chu Liwei could finish speaking, Dumpling nodded vigorously. Of course. Otherwise it would be so troublesome to be so big. It's still the most convenient to be with master like this. Chu Liwei turned to look at it and said seriously, "Oh, it seems like I guessed right. Look, even it said so." Everyone, what did it say? No, that's not the key to the problem. Lu Yu, am not asking about this. Mu Hongyu opened her mouth with difficulty. She looked conflicted. Yi Ranran took the initiative to help explain and whispered, "Lu Yu, what Hongyu wants to ask is you and this red-tailed phoenix. What's going on? Wasn't it very fierce to you just now? Why is it now?" Everyone had clearly seen what had happened before. This red-tailed phoenix was very rude to Chu Liwei in the beginning. It even seemed like it wanted to kill Chu Liwei several times. Why did the human and beast become so close in the blink of an eye? Chu Liwei suddenly understood. "Oh, you're asking about this," she smiled. Her eyes were curved and they were as bright as the Milky Way. "Because it's now my contracted magical beast." "Because it's now my contracted magical beast?" Everyone's expression turned sluggish for a moment. What did you say?" The one who spoke this time was not Mu Hongyu, nor was it Yi Ranran. It was actually Jiang Yuqing. After being stunned for a moment, his heart was filled with shock and he almost blurted out this sentence. Chu Liwei glanced at him indifferently with a faint smile. "Didn't I say it clearly enough just now? I said this red-tailed red phoenix is my magical beast now." Her tone was so casual as if she was talking about an insignificant matter. But in everyone's ears it was like thunder. Red-tailed phoenix. Such a divine beast had actually contracted with Chu Liwei? Elder Qiushi, who was beside him, finally came back to his senses. He stared blankly at the small ball on Chu Liwei's shoulder, and his old face trembled violently. Impossible. This is absolutely impossible. There were so many people present, so why was it Chu Liwei's turn? The red-tailed phoenix is a divine beast, how could it take a fancy to you? Although these words were unpleasant, they were very straightforward, and they also asked the same question in everyone's hearts. If the red-tailed phoenix really wanted to find a human to contract, why did it choose Chu Liwei among so many people? Chu Liwei raised her chin slightly, revealing the scratch on her neck. At this moment there were still traces of blood on it. Just now Dumpling was swallowed by it, so I wanted to save Dumpling. But I didn't expect that an accident would happen in the middle. The red-tailed phoenix's claws pierced my neck, and I inexplicably contracted with it. I also just found out about it. Chu Liwei explained in a sincere tone, and her expression was somewhat innocent. My magical beast was swallowed by it, so I could only use it to repay my debt. Everyone was speechless. The divine beast that millions of people yearned for, and you just made a contract with it like you had seen a ghost and took it for yourself? You even used a third-grade blood ferret to exchange for a divine beast. Everyone fell into a strange dead silence again. There was no choice, it was too shocking. It was the first time they saw a divine beast, and before they could see it clearly, Chu Liwei had already beaten them to it. Most importantly, the whole thing was too coincidental. There was no room for anyone to interrupt. Everyone saw with their own eyes that Chu Liwei's blood ferret was indeed swallowed by the nine-colored heavenly pheasant at that time. It was reasonable for Chu Liwei to want to save it. Moreover, the nine-colored heavenly pheasant should have planned to kill her as well. Otherwise, Chu Liwei wouldn't have that scratch on her neck. If it was under normal circumstances, it wouldn't matter if it killed 1 or 100 people. But the key was that it was breaking through at that time. In the end, it contracted with it just like that. Mu Hongyu gave her a thumbs up in admiration. Yi Ranran was also excited. "Lu Yu, you're amazing." Chu Liwei raised her eyebrows slightly and smiled very modestly. "Not at all. I was just a little lucky." Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 7:18. Wasn't it because his luck was a little better? How could she have the nerve to say such a thing? Was this a good point? Her luck was clearly heaven-defying. How could she let others live? Elder Qiushi almost couldn't catch his breath and his face turned red. He pointed at Chu Liwei, his hands trembling and his lips trembling for a long time, but he couldn't say a word. What could he say? What else could he say? Everything happened in front of everyone and he couldn't even slander her. That red-tailed phoenix had already contracted with her, so what else could he do? Chu Liwei looked at him with concern and asked, Elder Qiushi, what's wrong with you? Are you okay? Elder Qiushi retracted his hand, waved his sleeves fiercely and turned his head away. Out of sight, out of mind. Chu Liwei sneered in her heart. Of course she could see through Elder Qiushi's thoughts. It was nothing more than that he had some ulterior motives for Dumpling. For this reason he didn't even care about Shangguan. But why didn't he think about how he was qualified? After so many years his greedy nature still hadn't changed at all. A green shadow suddenly flew over. Chu Liwei took a closer look. Red Demon? She was still a little worried when Red Demon hit the barrier just now. But judging from its current appearance, well, there shouldn't be any problem. Red Demon glared at Dumpling angrily. Dumpling turned around and didn't look at it. She had seen it for so many years. What was there to see? Red Demon was so angry that its small body almost turned into a ball. With a chi-la sound, its body burned with green flames. It had felt that something was wrong earlier and now it seemed that its guess was right. It was Red Demon. To think that it had been sad for a long time back then. After all this time Red Demon was fine. It even broke through to a divine beast. Red Demon thought that it wasn't even a 9th grade magical beast now. It was one level lower than Red Demon and it was extremely angry. As it was angry it began to cry. It definitely wouldn't be able to defeat Red Demon in the future. Thinking of this, Hong Yao was filled with sorrow and bean-sized tears fell down. It hurriedly turned around and wiped the tears away with its wings. However, his tears flowed endlessly like a broken dam, drenching half of his wings. It had bullied it many times in the past and it would definitely get it back in the future. Chu Liwei felt both amused and distressed. Just as he was about to walk over, he paused and looked at Mu Qinghe helplessly. Vice Admiral Mu Qinghe also felt a headache coming on. He could control Hong Yao's willful temper, but at times like this, even he was helpless. Hong Yao, come back. Mu Qinghe shouted. Hong Yao didn't want to move, but thinking that there were so many people watching she had to go back, sobbing. Mu Qinghe frowned and looked at it. You weren't injured just now, so why are you crying? Hong Yao glared at him and turned its head away. What do you know? Mu Qinghe, who was despised for no reason, was speechless. You're Miss Chu Liwei, right? The man at the side who hadn't spoken finally spoke. His expression was calm, and there was a smile on his lips as if he wasn't shocked by this incident. Chu Liwei looked at him and her eyes flickered. She nodded. May I know who you are, Qin Yi? His long and narrow eyes narrowed as he glanced at Chu Liwei and the red-tailed phoenix on her shoulder and smiled. Miss Chu, you're really lucky. We've been waiting for this 9-colored heavenly pheasant for a long time, but we didn't expect it to choose you in the end. Chu Liwei coughed. I'm really sorry. It's nothing. It's not unreasonable for fate to be decided by the heavens. There are so many people here, but it still made a contract with Ms. Chu. This shows that some things are really destined, said Qin Yi with a faint smile. He spoke slowly and calmly, making one feel as if they were bathed in the spring breeze. Chu Liwei revealed a grateful expression. Thank you, Big Brother Qin and Big Brother Lei, for your understanding. Liu is very grateful. Lei Laoxi's eyes twitched harshly, and his legs turned to jelly as he almost knelt down. Damn it. It's fine if you want to act, but I really can't afford to be called Big Brother Lei. He hurriedly glanced at Qin Yi at the side but saw that his big brother still looked very calm. Miss Chu, you're too polite. Lei Laoxi's respect for his big brother rose spontaneously. Her Highness calls you Big Brother, but you can really handle it, Chu Liwei said very sincerely. I owe the two of you a favor regarding the legendary fiend. I'll definitely think of a way to compensate the two of you in the future. How about that? Lei Laoxi couldn't help it. No need. But originally, since it chose you in the first place, we can only be envious of it. If you weren't around, it might have just left on its own. It wouldn't have made a contract with a human. Chu Liwei glanced at Lei Laoxi with a smile in her eyes. Even though these two people's appearances and auras are different from before, their temperaments haven't changed at all. She thanked the two of them once more and didn't say anything else. Where's the third princess? She scanned her surroundings and finally landed on the spot where Shangguan disappeared. That deep pit had been filled up with messy tree roots and soil at some point in time. When she asked this, everyone then remembered that Shangguan had already disappeared for quite some time. Because the red-tailed phoenix caused too much of a commotion just now, they didn't have time to think about Shangguan's situation. Everyone quietened down and didn't know how to continue the conversation. Could it be that we have to go down and find Shangguan? Chu Luiyue turned around and looked at Jiang Yuqing. Eldest young master Jiang, the third princess has been missing for so long. Aren't you worried at all? Jiang Yuqing was about to speak when the ground suddenly shook. Red miasma floated over from all directions. The surrounding trees started to wither at a visible speed. The gigantic Wan Yeshan in the middle suddenly raised several tree roots. Qin Yi's expression turned cold. Someone touched the mother tree's seal. Chu Luiyue was shocked. There's actually a seal on this tree? Qin Yi stared at the Wan Yeshan that looked like it was about to go crazy and his face froze. Hurry and retreat. The moment he said that, cries and wails suddenly came from the surrounding forest. At that moment it seemed like thousands of people were crying in pain. Digression. Tomorrow at 12 a.m. Speaking of which, should I update 1 chapter a day or should I save 20 chapters and update them all at once? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from IG. Chapter 719. The chilly wind blew and the sorrowful cries sounded as if they were in hell. This bone-chilling sound made one's hair stand on end, and it even chilled one to the bone. Everyone retreated in unison. More and more red miasma started surging toward them. The surrounding trees were quickly withering. Only the incomparably thick mother tree in the middle did not show any signs of withering. Instead, it seemed to have been nourished by something. Every leaf seemed to have become even more emerald green. Every branch also became taller and straighter. The most shocking thing was that it seemed to be growing slowly and steadily in the midst of the red miasma. What's going on? Mu Hongyu hugged the golden mane bear cub in her arms nervously and looked at Chu Luiyue. Luyu, the miasma is coming over. This situation is exactly the same as what we saw when we turned around. Could it be that we're also going to chop? Qin Yi suddenly waved his sleeves, and a faint green barrier instantly enveloped the few of them. The red miasma drifted over, but when it came into contact with the green barrier, it quickly retreated as if it had encountered something terrifying. However, Qin Yi's barrier only surrounded the few people near him. Perhaps because Elder Qiushi, Jiang Yuqing and Mu Qinghe were standing further away, they weren't protected by the barrier. Seeing that Qin Yi's barrier easily blocked off the red miasma, Elder Qiushi immediately said, This, young Master Qin, there's still us. This red miasma doesn't look easy to deal with. If Qin Yi can take the initiative to help, we can save a lot of energy. Qin Yi glanced at him lightly and said in a seemingly smiling manner, My apologies. My abilities are limited and helping these few people is already my limit. Elder Qiushi was stunned. Hey you, Elder Qiushi, big brother Qin, and we just met by chance and we're already very grateful that he helped us. How can you order him to do anything? Chu Luiyue lightly interrupted Elder Qiushi's words and smiled very sincerely. Besides, don't you see that I'm also alone? Qin Yi's barrier actually only enveloped Mu Hongyu and the other two. Lei Laosi and her weren't inside. Chu Luiyue set up a barrier around himself, and the miasma drifted far away. Chu Luiyue felt slightly relieved. Dumpling rubbed its cheek and its gem-like eyes were dazzling. Chu Luiyue blinked and immediately understood what Dumpling meant. Does this mean that with it around the miasma won't hurt me? Lei Laosi raised his hammer and hammered the ground harshly. A transparent barrier instantly appeared. It enveloped him. Several streaks of icy blue lightning danced on it, crackling loudly. Lei Laosi looked at Elder Qiushi in disdain. In this mystic forest, if you don't have the ability, you can't rely on anyone. In the end, only death awaited. Elder Qiushi's expression was ugly. Isn't this pointing at my nose and scolding me for being useless? Just as he was about to speak, Jiang Yuqing stopped him with a stern gaze. It was already embarrassing enough just now. Do you think it's not enough? Elder Qiushi could only shut his mouth indignantly. Mu Qinghe took out a jade bottle. Eldest young master, the pill inside is the antidote for the miasma. If the miasma accidentally invades your body, you just have to take this pill. As she spoke, she handed one to Jiang Yuqing and another to Elder Qiushi. Elder Qiushi couldn't wait to take the elixir away. Jiang Yuqing glanced at the pill in his hand. At the start, you didn't seem to have mentioned this. Mu Qinghe's expression was calm. Because the last general also didn't expect the poison of the miasma to become so scary. When we came here previously, we could set up a barrier to block most of the miasma outside, but now we have no choice but to use the antidote. The last general also just thought of this. Also, there's only one bottle of antidote. Jiang Yuqing looked at him. Mu Qinghe had always been serious and cautious in doing things. It was absolutely impossible for her to only think of this pill now. Moreover, even if the quantity was small, she could have given one to Shangguanwan first. After all, her identity was the most important in this group of people. But Mu Qinghe didn't do so. That was clearly showing that she didn't want to give it to her. Mu Qinghe's expression was indifferent, and she looked very magnanimous. Jiang Yuqing didn't say much. Shangguanwan had always disliked Mu Qinghe. Didn't Mu Qinghe feel the same way about her? Moreover, Shangguanwan had many tricks up her sleeve, so she didn't need these things. Mu Qinghe looked at Chu Luiwei again and handed over the bottle expressionlessly. Chu Luiwei raised his eyebrows slightly. He didn't expect Mu Qinghe to be willing to give him such a precious antidote. Even though she was the one who gave it to him after refining it. Chu Luiwei smiled very politely. Before he said anything, he heard Mu Qinghe say, "Miss Chu, please return the black shield that was snatched away by the 9-colored heavenly pheasant." So she's here to ask for something. Chu Luiwei's expression became a little dull. When Shangguanwan jumped down, he didn't think of a way to save her. Instead, he was more concerned about this black shield. Interesting. Her fan-like eyelashes trembled slightly. When she looked up, her eyes were already calm. "Thank you for your kind intentions, Vice Admiral Mu. However, I have the red-tailed phoenix beside me, so I don't really need this antidote. You should keep it for yourself. As for that black shield, I'll naturally return it to the third princess when I find her." Mu Qinghe pursed his lips. He wasn't sure if it was his imagination, but he felt that the current Chu Luiwei seemed to be a little different from the Chu Luiwei he saw in Country Yaochen at the start. The previous Chu Luiwei was polite but also a little timid. However, the current her already dared to reject him directly. That's right. After all, she's contracted with a legendary fiend. She's definitely different from before. Mu Qinghe nodded and swallowed a pill before keeping the jade bottle. Look. That miasma seems to be surging towards that mother tree. Ran exclaimed. When the crowd heard that, they all looked over and indeed saw that the miasma was slowly but firmly floating towards the tree in the middle. Its branches and leaves rustled as if it was swallowing the miasma. Chu Luiwei frowned slightly and looked at Qin Yi. "Big brother Qin, is this related to the seal on the mother tree that you mentioned previously?" Qin Yi nodded. The mystic forest is filled with miasma every day, but it's usually in the periphery and has never drifted to the center. Actually, it wasn't like it had never happened before. More than a year ago, when they first arrived here, they coincidentally saw the same scene. However, at that time the seal had just cracked open, and the 9-colored heavenly pheasant chose to rest on this tree. Its existence mended that crack and was equivalent to adding a second layer of strength to the seal. Hence, from the time it hibernated here, nothing like this had happened in the mystic forest. Now that it had left, the seal would naturally be easily destroyed. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 720. That Wan Yeshan was still growing non-stop, and a few tree roots seemed to be unable to hold back as they pulled out from the ground and flew up. They danced wildly with the wind. The tree roots, which looked like they were filled with blood, swung wildly and emitted a frightening pressure. A thick, suffocating smell of blood spread out from within. It was also mixed with the smell of all sorts of rotting things. It was nauseating. Even though they were separated by a barrier, everyone could still feel it, and their expressions changed one after another. What exactly is down there? The thing inside those tree roots can't really be human blood, right? Ran couldn't help but mutter softly. Otherwise, there's really no way to explain this bloody smell. But if that's really the case, it's too chilling. Who knows whose blood this is? Zhang Yuqing and the rest didn't say anything. They were all dragged down before, so they naturally knew what was down there. Qin Yi said, "We can't stay here any longer. We have to leave immediately." As he spoke, he glanced at Chu Luiyue without batting an eyelid. Chu Luiyue didn't turn back, but he also knew what Qin Yi meant, so he nodded and agreed. "That's right. This tree situation is very strange. If we stay here any longer, who knows what will happen." With that, she lifted her leg, intending to retreat again. However, Elder Qiushi immediately spoke up. "We can't leave. The third princess is still under that tree. If we leave just like that, what will happen to the third princess?" Chu Luiyue sneered in his heart. For such a long time just now, he didn't think about this matter at all. Now that dumpling belongs to me and I don't have any benefits to reap, he suddenly thought of it. "Since Elder Qiushi cares so much, why don't you go down and take a look yourself?" Elder Qiushi quickened his pace, rushed to Chu Luiyue and said coldly, "This red-tailed phoenix has been staying on this mother tree all this while. Now that it's become your fiend, it's naturally the most suitable for you to go down. Didn't you just say that with it around, this miasma isn't a problem for you?" Chu Luiyue knew that Elder Qiushi was shameless, but he didn't expect him to be so shameless as to say such words without batting an eyelid. Looking at his self-righteous expression, Chu Luiyue was so angry that he laughed. "What Elder Qiushi means is that you want me, the person with the lowest cultivation level here, to search for the third princess's whereabouts by myself. Aren't you thinking too highly of me?" However, Elder Qiushi refused to give up. "This divine beast is already yours. If you don't go, who will?" As expected, he's still holding a grudge about Dumpling. Chu Luiyue was well aware of the principle of treasuring a jade ring becomes a crime. Unfortunately, Dumpling was in an emergency at the time and had no way to avoid these people. It wouldn't be long before this matter would spread like wildfire. Chu Luiyue knew that Dumpling's existence would cause a lot of trouble, but he didn't expect it to start now. "Elder Qiushi, actually, I'm also very worried about the third princess's whereabouts. It's not a problem for me to take the lead, but if we all go together, we'll have a better chance. What do you think?" Chu Luiyue couldn't be bothered to refuse and directly agreed to this matter. In fact, even if Elder Qiushi didn't mention it, she would still look for Shangguan. At that time, she saw clearly that Shangguan chose to jump down herself. It would be strange if there wasn't something fishy about this. Now that she was willing to look for her, Shangguan probably didn't want to be found. Since they wanted her to make a move, then she would inevitably drag the rest of the people down with her. Elder Qiushi's expression changed slightly. He originally planned to let Chu Luiyue go down by herself, but he couldn't refute her words. Chu Luiyue looked at Zhang Yuqing and said with a smile, "Young Master Qiushi is most worried about the third princess. Eldest young Master Zhang should be most worried about third princess. I think he will definitely go with me, right?" Zhang Yuqing's face was a little cold. "I don't want to go down at all. After all, I know what it's like down there. I can feel that there's something wrong with my body. Even though I tried my best to regulate my breathing and barely recovered a little, my internal and external injuries haven't completely healed. If I encounter any danger again." However, he couldn't say no in front of so many people. "Of course." Zhang Yuqing's voice was so cold that it seemed to have frozen over. "This isn't appropriate." Qin Yi suddenly spoke up with a disapproving expression. "This mother tree's seal has already been broken, and nobody knows what kind of danger there will be. Even old 4 and I don't dare to fight head-on. If you go down now, you'll just be courting death. By then, not only will you not be able to find her, but you'll also lose your lives." Chu Luiyue's brows moved slightly. She knew that Qin Yi was against her going down. However, she had to go this time. "Big brother Qin, we appreciate your good intentions. However, the third princess's whereabouts are unknown and she's in danger. We can't just stand by and do nothing. Please take care of my friends." Mu Hongyu anxiously said. "You, what do you mean by this? You don't want us to go together?" Upon hearing that, Chong Wanzhou didn't say anything and just walked straight toward Chu Luiyue. When he reached the green barrier, he held the cloud sky copper sword tightly and glanced at Qin Yi. "She goes, I'll go too." Even though Qin Yi was also very worried, he still couldn't help but laugh when he saw Chong Wanzhou like this. "Am I the only one who's worried about her? If Chu Luiyue insists on going, old 4 and I definitely won't stay outside." Boom. At this moment, a loud sound suddenly came from behind the crowd. They turned around and saw that the ground in the distance had suddenly collapsed. Countless withered trees fell down. A gigantic ravine instantly appeared. Also, the area of this collapse was still spreading. Very quickly, the same scene started happening in other directions. Uneasiness surged in Chu Liyue's heart as he tipped his toes and flew up. When he saw the scene below clearly, even Chu Liyue couldn't help but be shocked. The ground collapsed and a ring-shaped ravine appeared with the mother tree as the center. The most important thing was that the area of the collapse actually started spreading outward. It was like an invisible wave that surged up continuously. The entire mystic forest actually started collapsing. The previously lush forest was now shrouded by the miasma and completely turned into a withered forest. The entire sky became dark once again. This time, it was different from the heaven and earth phenomenon that was caused when the nine-colored heavenly pheasant was about to break through. The entire place exuded a sinister and strange aura. Chu Liyue then looked at the mother tree in the middle. Amidst the raging winds, all the trees were withering and being swallowed. Only this one was safe and sound and was even growing continuously. As Chu Liyue looked at the vibrant green leaves, a guess suddenly flashed across his mind. Could it be that this mother tree is swallowing the other tree's strength? This thought made Chu Liyue feel a chill in his heart. If I didn't guess wrongly, there should be a lot of people trapped under those trees like Jiang Yuqing, right? This current situation, Shangguan is under this mother tree. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from LoveWeb. Chapter 721. A white light flashed across Chu Liyue's mind. She already knew that Shangguan must have a motive for purposely bringing so many people to the mystic forest. However, it was only now that Chu Liyue finally understood what she wanted to do. She wanted to use these people's strength to recover her Yuan meridian and abilities. Many of the people who came had Daijing Yuan meridians, especially the disciples from the various clans. Almost all of them had Daijing Yuan meridians. After all, they were all the most outstanding seedlings selected from the various clans. Wanjing competition. So this is what she's doing. She can't recover her Yuan meridian, so she's targeting other people's Yuan meridians? Although it sounded creepy, if this conjecture was true, then many of the things that had happened before had a reasonable explanation. Chu Liyue was horrified. She was the clearest about how vicious Shangguan was. However, she never expected that Shangguan would actually dare to do this. How many talented cultivators is she going to attack? She actually dared to. For a moment, many emotions surged in Chu Liyue's heart, and she didn't know what to say. Shangguan's Yuan meridian was damaged by the fire in her Tianjing Yuan meridian back then. This kind of injury was basically unrecoverable. This was because the power of the Tianjing Yuan meridian was simply too strong. Even Chu Liyue herself couldn't think of a way to help Shangguan reconstruct her Yuan meridian. However, since she did this, it meant that she definitely had a way. Even if it was such a despicable and sinister method. Liu, what's wrong? Yuan looked up slightly and asked worriedly. The expression on Liyue's face doesn't seem right. This sound made Chu Liyue return to her senses. She took a deep breath and landed back on the ground. Everyone turned to look at him. Chu Liyue said in a low voice, "We can't leave. I'm afraid we can't leave." A few creases appeared on Qin Yi's forehead. The entire mystic forest is collapsing except where we are. At the same time underground. After Shangguan jumped down after falling for a long time, she finally landed in the swamp again. She took out a water pearl and its faint glow illuminated the surroundings. Because she had been here once before, Shangguan wasn't afraid or worried this time. Instead, she was a little excited. She looked around and her gaze suddenly froze. Not far away, there was something emitting a dark green fluorescent light. That light looked a little cold and strange. Shangguan hesitated for a while but still decided to approach. After getting closer, Shangguan was surprised to find that there was a platform in the middle of the black swamp. The surrounding swamp surged, but there was one platform that remained unmoved. As for that dark green light, it was hanging above the platform. Suddenly, Shangguan seemed to have stepped on something. Her heart skipped a beat. She looked down and pulled out one of her legs. Below, a head was surging up along with the swamp. That's what I stepped on just now. Most importantly, this head wasn't made of white bones. It was a human head that hadn't had time to rot. It was a pale face with bulging eyes and deeply sunken cheeks. It looked like it died with a grievance. Shang Wanwan felt disgusted and directly stepped on it again. When that thing was submerged by the black swamp again, Shang Wanwan patted her chest, closed her eyes and let out a long sigh. Sure enough, the swamp below was flowing. When I dealt with this person just now, he seemed to be quite far away from here. I didn't expect to meet him again. Unlucky. Shang Wanwan quickly left that place and ran forward. Very quickly she reached the stairs at the edge of the platform. There weren't any barriers here, so she could easily come up. Shang Wanwan shook off all the dirt on her body, before she looked at the ball of green fire again. It was really just a ball of fire. It was only the size of a palm and was quietly floating in the air. Shang Wanwan was a little puzzled. What is this? Judging from its position, this thing should be directly below the mother tree. Suddenly, a tree root swung over from another direction. Shang Wanwan was shocked and quickly bent down. However, the target of the tree root wasn't her but the ball of fire. It flew over quickly but stopped in front of the ball of fire. A slender flame flew up and gently touched the tree root. The power contained in the tree root was continuously poured into the ball of fire. After a while, the tree root disappeared again. And the ball of fire was bigger than before. Shang Wanwan's heart was beating wildly. So, the power that was devoured was finally poured into this. If I take this ball of fire for myself, then, wouldn't that power become mine? Thinking of this, her eyes lit up and she almost couldn't control the excitement in her heart. She took out a blood-red pill and quickly swallowed it. A moment later, the incomplete yuan meridian in her body seemed to have been stimulated by some kind of power and became alive again. The skin on her entire body had turned red. Black lines were faintly discernible. Looked very strange. She raised her foot and was about to step forward when she suddenly stopped. This thing might be dangerous. Shang Wanwan's heart stirred and suddenly took out a set of armor. It was the pure gold sacred armor. She quickly put it on and took a step forward with a peace of mind. Digression. I feel like I'm writing a ghost story, facepalm. 6 o'clock. Since everyone said that they want to update at 20, then let's do it together. Every monthly ticket is a ladder to explosive updates. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 722. Taking a step forward, Shang Wanwan clenched her fists nervously. After waiting for a while, nothing unexpected happened. Everything in the surroundings was still the same as before. Shang Wanwan heaved a sigh of relief in her heart and continued to walk up. Wearing the pure gold sacred armor gave her more confidence in her heart. In the quiet and dark space, only the sound of the black mud and her own footsteps could be heard. Shang Wanwan held her breath. Another tree root floated over. This time Shang Wanwan had experience. She just stood there and waited. As expected, the tree root flew directly in front of the ball of fire. The faint green flame lightly twirled around it in a small circle. The power contained in it was quickly transferred into the ball of fire. Shang Wanwan waited at the side. Soon the second tree root also left. That ball of fire had already become twice as big as before. Shang Wanwan thought to herself. The power contained in this tree root seemed to be more abundant than expected. She waited for a moment and walked forward again. There was no cover around that ball of fire. When she was 3 steps away from that ball of fire, Shang Wanwan was surprised to see that it was actually a burning rune. It was just that this rune looked very unfamiliar. Who left it here? Shang Wanwan's heart was beating wildly. Then she stretched out her hand and slowly reached out towards that ball of fire. Just as her hand approached, that ball of fire suddenly rose up. It burned her hand fiercely. Hiss! Shang Wanwan felt the pain and hurriedly drew her hand back. This thing didn't look special, but the temperature was extremely high. Shang Wanwan lowered her head to take a look and realized that only half of her palm was burned. Because the pure gold sacred armor only covered half of her palm. The parts that were protected by the armor were intact, but the parts that were exposed were directly burned with huge blood blisters. It looked very horrifying. While Shang Wanwan was surprised, A thought suddenly flashed through her mind. So the power of this pure gold holy armor is really so powerful. She hadn't even used it yet. She was just wearing it, but its defensive power was already so strong. He really didn't know how strong this pure gold armor would be after it was fully awakened. Shang Wanwan licked her lips, a trace of greed and excitement flashing in her eyes. She thought for a moment and decided to use both hands at the same time. His wrist was wrapped tightly by the pure gold armor. As such, as long as they didn't touch his exposed skin, he didn't have to worry about anything. Shang Wanwan slowly reached out and hugged the ball of fire from the outside. From time to time, sparks would fly in all directions, but because they all landed on the pure gold sacred armor, Shang Wanwan wasn't affected at all. Her eyes were fixed on the ball of green fire as she approached it bit by bit. Boom! All of a sudden the flame exploded. Shang Wanwan turned pale with fright. Just as she was about to retreat, she found that the ball of fire suddenly flew towards her. Poof! That flame directly hit the position of her heart. Shang Wanwan only felt as though there was a huge rock pressing on her chest, so heavy that she almost couldn't breathe. But this feeling disappeared in an instant. In an instant, it was as though something had forcefully passed through her chest and entered her heart. A scorching burning sensation came from her heart. Shang Wanwan was extremely flustered. She didn't expect that ball of fire to enter her heart directly. With such a temperature, it wouldn't take long before her entire body would be burned to ashes. The painful burning sensation reminded her of that night in the royal family's ancestral hall. She had once thought that that was the most painful day of her life, but she didn't expect that this thing was also so torturous. Ah! Shang Wanwan cried out in pain and fell onto the ground. She covered the position of her heart tightly with both hands, wanting to chase that ball of fire out. But immediately she felt that the thing had started to move. There was an intense pain in her abdomen. Shang Wanwan's originally blood-red face turned slightly pale. The pain was really unbearable. She could only use both hands to hold the ground tightly and hit her head on the ground, wanting to faint and forget this pain. Clang! A dull sound was heard. However, she had forgotten that she was still wearing the pure gold sacred armor and her forehead was also protected. She couldn't even torture herself. But she didn't dare to really take off the pure gold sacred armor and could only endure it in the end. She didn't notice that during this process, the strange black patterns on her body were also undergoing subtle changes. After a long and incomparably torturous period, that terrifying pain finally lessened by a lot. Shang Wanwan curled up on the ground, her entire body covered in cold sweat. Because her hands were scratching the ground with force, her hands were dripping with blood and her bones could be seen. Her lips were also bitten by herself, the blood was messy and unrecognizable. She panted heavily and finally found her reason with great difficulty. The pain on her body reminded her she was still alive. Shang Wanwan regained her senses and immediately began to check her body. In the end, she was stunned on the spot. That ball of fire actually landed in her dantian in the end. She was connected to the 5 treasures, so that ball of fire could spread from the flames to her dantian. Shang Wanwan stared in a daze for a while before she discovered that that thing no longer had the appearance of a runic seal. Instead, it had completely turned into a fireball. It quietly floated in the center of her dantian and that burning pain seemed to gradually dissipate. Ever since Shang Wanwan's Yuan meridian was destroyed, her core of essence was also damaged. Right now, the place where this dark green fireball was at was where her core of essence should be. A majestic energy suddenly surged out from that fireball and spread to her limbs and bones. The strange patterns on Shang Wanwan's body seemed to have come alive in an instant. Not long later, those patterns seeped into her skin again. Everything happened too quickly. Shang Wanwan didn't even have time to react before she felt that the Yuan meridian in her body was completely wrapped in a layer of dark green light. Then a rich energy flowed out from within. Shang Wanwan suddenly trembled violently. My Yuan meridian has been restored. As if to confirm her guess, another wave of energy surged out from the fireball in her dantian and spread along the dark green Yuan meridian. Shang Wanwan almost couldn't believe what was happening. She confirmed it again and tried again. When she discovered that the Yuan meridian that was wrapped in the dark green light could smoothly circulate the energy in her body, Shang Guanwan was finally sure that her Yuan meridian had indeed been restored. The black patterns on her body had all dissipated, leaving only the space between her eyebrows. There was a final mark that looked like a strange black runic seal. At this moment, something suddenly appeared in her mind. She closed her eyes and carefully sensed it. Suddenly, her eyes widened in surprise. She could actually sense the location of everyone under Wan Yeshan's control in the mystic forest. As long as she wanted to, she could devour any of their energy. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 723. Upon closer inspection, she could even identify the identities of those people. There was the Black Cavalry and disciples from various sects. In addition, there were a few people that she did not recognize. They must have been swallowed after trespassing into the mystic forest. Shang Guanwan never expected that this thing would bring her such a big surprise. Previously, she thought that she would choose a portion of these people to take action after arriving at the mystic forest. If something happened to everyone, it would inevitably arouse suspicion from outsiders. In addition, she had to make sure that she would not be discovered before she could take action. For example, when she was trapped in the enclosed space with more than 10 people. Everyone would think that those people were swallowed by the black swamp and would not associate it with her. After all, the mystic forest was full of dangers and it was normal to encounter accidental deaths. With these conditions added together, the range of her actions was very small. But now it was different. As long as she wanted, she could quietly get rid of all these people. Shang Guanwan checked the situation in her body again. The fireball in her dantian stopped after 2 streams of power surged out. Shang Guanwan waited for a while, but it did not move again. She thought for a while and guessed that these 2 streams of power might have been swallowed by the 2 tree roots just now. And these were only enough to repair 1/10 of her Yuan meridian. If she wanted to completely recover, she had to continue. And these trapped people, added together, it should be enough, right? When she thought that her Yuan meridian could be successfully recovered, Shang Guanwan was so excited that her body trembled slightly. God knows how long she had waited for this day. No one would know that she was the one who did all this. Therefore she could do it without worry. Perhaps, she could even take this opportunity to raise her level. Shang Guanwan was extremely excited. Her eyes were scarlet as she began to choose among these people. First, she had to choose someone with a high-level Yuan meridian. This way, she would be able to convert all the power contained in their Yuan meridian into her own. It would also have the best effect on the recovery of her Yuan meridian. Thinking of this, a figure suddenly appeared in Shang Guanwan's mind. Right. Where's Chu Luiyue? Her Yuan meridian was definitely one of the best among these people, right? Unfortunately, Shang Guanwan couldn't find Chu Luiyue even after looking around. It must have not been devoured by Wan Yeshan yet. Shang Guanwan was a little unwilling. She had disliked Chu Luiyue for a long time. If she could get rid of Chu Luiyue at the same time, it would be perfect. Forget it, recovering my Yuan meridian is more important. Shang Guanwan thought. In the distance, a certain sect disciple who had been trapped was about to break free, but the tree roots on his body suddenly sped up. It pierced straight into his chest. Ah! A short and hurried cry came from his throat, but it soon stopped abruptly. This was because the power in his body had been forcefully taken away by the roots. In the blink of an eye, his life was taken. He didn't even have time to react before he lost all signs of life. His eyes were wide open, his cheeks were sunken, and his entire body was curled up into a small ball. It was very strange. The same scene played out one after another in this dark space. The entire mystic forest was collapsing. This news gave everyone a huge shock. Even Qin Yi's expression turned serious. When Chu Luiyue saw his expression, he knew that they probably hadn't experienced such a situation before. Things were more troublesome than expected. Why did the mystic forest suddenly collapse? Jiang Yuqing knitted his brows tightly. Chu Luiyue pointed at Wan Yeshan in the middle. Perhaps it's like what Big Brother Qin said before. It's because someone touched the seal. Jiang Yuqing fell silent. If we're talking about who's most likely to do this, Shang Guanwan is the most likely. After all, I went down from here just now. Besides, Jiang Yuqing knew what I was planning to do this time. Since that's the case, it seems like we have to go down this time. As Chu Luiyue spoke, he walked forward. Lei Laosi hurriedly followed. I'll take the lead. Chu Liwei turned around and smiled at him. Big brother Lei, don't worry. Since I've already contracted the red-tailed phoenix, it should be the safest. Lei Laosi immediately said. How can that do? How can I let a young lady like you take the lead? Although Her Highness has a legendary fiend now, she's still a stage 5 warrior after all. Besides, Big Brother and I have been here for quite a long time, so we roughly know how to go down. I'm also very efficient. Lei Laosi finally thought of a reasonable reason. Since he had already said so much, it would be a little strange if he continued to push it away. Chu Liwei followed his advice and took a step back. Then I'll have to trouble Big Brother Lei. Lei Laosi's hands trembled again. He really couldn't take Her Highness calling him Big Brother again and again. Lei Laosi hurriedly rushed to the front and arrived at the position where Shangguanwan jumped down. This place was basically sealed off now. He held the hammer tightly with both hands and his expression became serious and solemn. Everyone had already followed over one after another. Since they couldn't escape outside, the safest plan now was to stay together. Lei Laosi circulated the force in his body, and the aura around him surged crazily. Streaks of icy blue lightning swam around the hammer. A vast amount of pressure spread out from above. Then he shouted and smashed the hammer down harshly. Gale hammer. Violent winds blew instantly. Smoke and dust rose everywhere. Bang! There was a dull sound. Chu Liwei immediately felt the ground under her feet shaking. A crack appeared instantly. The force on the hammer kept spreading to the surroundings. The crack also rapidly expanded. The ground was quickly filled with cracks like a spider web. Boom! The ground in front of everyone collapsed again. A huge pit appeared in front of everyone. Lei Laosi jumped down first. Chu Liwei followed closely behind. Chang Wanzhou and the rest wanted to follow immediately but were stopped by Qin Yi's barrier. They turned around and saw that Qin Yi didn't seem to be in a hurry. He looked at Jiang Yuqing and the rest leisurely. Everyone please. Jiang Yuqing narrowed his eyes and didn't argue with him as he followed them. Elder Qiushi didn't dare to rush to the front or the back. When he saw that Jiang Yuqing and the rest had gone down, he then hurriedly chased after them. Mu Qinghe glanced at Qin Yi. I feel like I've seen this Qin Yi somewhere before. May I ask when you came to the Mystic Forest, young Master Qin? Qin Yi's eyes were open and his lips curved up slightly. This is our private matter, so please forgive us for not being able to tell you. Also, Vice Admiral Mu, eldest young Master Jiang and the rest have all gone down. Aren't you going to follow them? Mu Qinghe suppressed her doubts, turned around and jumped down as well. Qin Yi smiled and then chased after them with Mu Hongyu and the rest. Digression. Tomorrow at 12 a.m. Mobile users please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 724. It was dark all around. The dark and cramped space was filled with a thick stench of decay and blood, and even the surrounding air seemed to have become sticky. Dumpling suddenly raised its wings. A red flame flew out instantly and streaked across the night sky like a shooting star, leaving behind a clear and bright line before finally disappearing into the abyss below. With the guidance of this flame, it was much more convenient for everyone to move forward. Lei Laosi, who was at the front, directly flew down. Chu Liwei followed closely behind. Everyone else also followed behind. Big Brother Lei, have you guys been here before? Chu Liwei asked softly as he descended. Lei Laosi nodded. Once, but that was a very long time ago. Back then they had just arrived at the Mystic Forest and weren't very familiar with everything here, so they accidentally got into this trouble. Afterward, he relied on his big brother's help to get out of this godforsaken place. Since then, the two of them had basically been staying beside that mother tree to guard the 9-colored heavenly pheasant. Naturally, they didn't encounter such a thing again. Occasionally, someone would barge in from the outside, but they would be stopped at the periphery. Chu Liwei and his group were the only ones who entered the depths of the Mystic Forest in the past year. I wonder if it's still the same as before, Lei Laosi mumbled. Chu Liu's heart moved and he asked again, oh right. Big Brother Lei, I heard that the miasma in the Mystic Forest is actually white. Why is it that when we came here this time it was red? Also, it was mixed with a fishy and sweet blood stench, which made one very uncomfortable. Lei Laosi frowned. Speaking of this, actually Big Brother and I aren't too sure what's going on. When we first came, the miasma was indeed white. We didn't go out for a long time, and when we saw it again it was already red. But the color was still rather light then, and it gradually became darker until it became like this now. He was also curious at the start, but his big brother kept telling him not to bother about it. Their only motive here was to guard the 9-colored heavenly pheasant. Lei Laosi had always been obedient to Qin Yen, and with his carefree personality he really didn't ask further. Chu Liyue fell into deep thought. According to Lei Laosi's words, it was highly possible that the mystic forest only started to change after they came here. And the time they came here, Chu Liyue speculated that they must have come here after her accident. It was even possible that Dumpling was brought here by them. Thinking of this, Dumpling suddenly glanced at her and turned her head. Chu Liyue was a little surprised. Dumpling means that it wasn't brought here by Qin Yi and the other two? Then where did it come from? Chu Liyue asked Dumpling again in his mind. Dumpling, did you come here on your own? Dumpling shook her head again. Chu Liyue narrowed his eyes, but when he looked at Dumpling, his eyes revealed a trace of confusion. In actual fact, even it didn't know what exactly happened to its body. Back then, Shangguan forcefully broke the contract with it before it lost its virginity. That was why it was able to survive. Originally, it wanted to perish together with Shangguan and Jiang Yuqing to take revenge for her. In the end, before it could do anything, it fainted. When it woke up again, its physical body was already left in the mystic forest, and its soul was split into two. Half was left in its physical body, and the other half entered a third-grade blood ferret. It didn't know what it went through in the middle at all. Dumpling's thoughts were clearly transmitted to Chu Liyue. She thought for a long time and didn't say anything. It seems like someone helped me, but I don't know who that person is. Perhaps I can get something out of Qin Yi and Lei Laosi. However, now isn't a good time. Quickly look. There seems to be someone down there. Lei Laosi suddenly shouted. Chu Liyue immediately suppressed the many emotions in her heart and looked in the direction Lei Laosi was pointing at. Sure enough, in that dim space there seemed to be a vague figure. Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat and she immediately increased her speed. However, when she gradually got closer, Chu Liyue gradually knitted her brows. This person doesn't seem to be Shangguan. Even if Shangguan turned into ashes, I would still be able to recognize her. And this person down there, even though I can't see her face, that figure definitely isn't Shangguan. However, Chu Liyue only hesitated for a moment before she continued to rush down. Seeing that she actually overtook him, Lei Laosi hurriedly increased his speed and rushed over. What are those things down there? How can I let Her Highness rush to the front? However, Lei Laosi quickly realized, to his shock, that Chu Liyue's speed wasn't any slower than his. In this space down there, all cultivators would be suppressed to a certain extent. However, Chu Liyue doesn't seem to be. Perhaps it's because she contracted the red-tailed phoenix? Lei Laosi couldn't be bothered to ask more as he could only follow up at full speed. After a period of time, Chu Liyue finally stopped. Lei Laosi arrived almost at the same time. Seeing that Chu Liyue was about to walk toward that figure, he hurriedly said, "Wait. Hold on. It's dangerous." Chu Liyue shook her head. "Don't worry. This person is already dead." Lei Laosi was taken aback as he walked closer. It was a young lady whose calves were stuck in the black mud, and most of her body was still outside. They saw the back view from above just now, so it was no wonder that they couldn't tell. It was just that her eyes were tightly shut and she wasn't breathing at all. She was indeed dead. Chu Liyue raised her hand and snapped her fingers. A ball of fire appeared in her palm and instantly lit up the surroundings. And they finally saw that lady's face. Her face was purple and her cheeks were deeply sunken in. Her facial features were distorted, and she looked like she experienced extreme torture before she died. However, there was only a wound on her chest as if something directly pierced through it, and a large patch of blood stained the wound. Chu Liyue's pupils constricted slightly. Lei Laosi's expression also changed. How did this lady die so miserably and strangely? Who is this? The people at the back also followed one after another. Jiang Yuqing walked closer and could already tell that the lady wasn't Shangguan. Chu Liyue glanced at him. She's a disciple of the 9-Star Alliance. In fact, this lady was the one who repeatedly mocked them previously. She was also the one who bullied Yi Ranran at Thousand View Garden back then. She was still arrogant and despotic when they saw her previously, but they didn't expect her to die in the blink of an eye. Jiang Yuqing walked to the two of them. When he saw that lady's face, his expression turned cold. Chu Luiyue had been paying attention to him, and when he saw his reaction he raised his brows slightly. How strange. Seeing this scene, Jiang Yuqing's first reaction wasn't shock or doubt. Instead it seemed like anger? Why does it seem like he's not surprised by this scene at all? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 725. This person isn't the third princess? Elder Qiushi also walked over with a shocked expression and couldn't help but blurt out. Isn't this directly below the mother tree? The third princess clearly came down from here just now. Why isn't she here? Jiang Yuqing said coldly, this black swamp is flowing. So much time has passed. She might have gone somewhere else. Elder Qiushi slapped his head. I actually forgot about this. If that's the case, wouldn't it be even more difficult to find the third princess? No one responded to him. Elder Qiushi finally felt a hint of awkwardness. At this moment Mu Qinghe and the others also caught up. Yi Ranran saw the woman's face and exclaimed, Isn't this the new disciple of the Nine-Star Alliance? She had the deepest impression of this woman in the entire Nine-Star Alliance. She didn't expect to meet her again in such a situation. Chu Luiyue nodded. That's her. How can it be? Didn't the Nine-Star Alliance people protect her? By the way, where are the other disciples of the Nine-Star Alliance? Yi Ranran muttered softly. He turned his head and looked around, but he didn't find any traces of anyone else. She seems to be the only one here. The other members of the Nine-Star Alliance aren't here. Chu Luiyue shook her head. After confirming the woman's identity, she had already checked the surroundings. There was no one else around. Mu Qinghe sized up the woman and said in a deep voice, She probably separated from the others. She probably got separated from the others and came here alone. Then she was strangled to death by the rolling leaf firs roots. Upon closer inspection, there were indeed signs of being tightly bound by something on her body. That one Yeshan is really scary. Yi Ranran had a lingering fear and a complicated expression on his face. Originally he wanted to wait for a chance to find the Nine-Star Alliance to get revenge, but he didn't expect. Now he had already guessed what had happened. Under those withered trees. Perhaps they were all trapped people. If that was the case, it meant that the 1,000 people who came to the Mystic Forest were all in such a situation. Just like this woman, there were countless people who had died here without a sound. Thinking of this, it was really chilling. She wasn't strangled to death by the tree roots. A clear and calm voice suddenly sounded. Everyone fell silent. Mu Qinghe looked at Chu Luiyue. What did you say? Chu Luiyue raised her chin. Her expression was nonchalant, but her gaze was very determined. If she was strangled to death by the tree roots, she shouldn't be like this. Mu Qinghe took 2 more steps forward, and with the help of the flame he could finally see more clearly. A hint of shock flashed across his eyes. After a moment of silence he finally nodded. My eyes were playing tricks on me. She really didn't die for this reason. He had seen what it was like to be entangled to death by a rolling leaf fir. And this woman, hers death was really too strange. What was even weirder was, Chu Luiyue continued. The force in her body disappeared. Mu Qinghe pursed his lips. This was something he had just discovered. What do you mean? Mu Hongyu was comforting Yi Ranran and couldn't help but ask. Chu Luiyue explained. After a normal cultivator dies, even if their life is gone, the force stored in their body won't dissipate immediately. Especially for this kind of talented person. There's definitely a lot of force in their flesh and bones. She should have died not long ago, but the force in her body is almost all gone. Chu Luiyue's words attracted everyone's attention. As expected. Lei Laoxi's realm was high, so he was naturally more sensitive to these things. The force in her body seems to have been sucked away by something. It's completely gone. Wait. Her core of essence seems to be damaged too. Lei Laoxi scanned the area with his force and had a horrified expression. Jiang Yuqing's eyelashes fluttered and he lowered his eyes slightly. Chu Liyue saw everything clearly from the side and sneered in his heart. It seemed that Jiang Yuqing was also very clear about what Shangguanwan was doing. If he remembered correctly, this woman had the Daijing Yuan meridian. It looks like something has devoured her power. Wan Yeshan is just a convenient tool, said Qini lightly. Everyone fell silent. Given the current situation, this was probably the only possibility. What is it? How could it be so cruel and terrifying? Yi Ranran was young and had never seen such a scene before. He was both frightened and angry. Elder Qiushi was worried. I didn't expect there to be such a terrifying thing in this place. We must find the third princess as soon as possible. Otherwise, the corners of Chu Liyue's mouth twitched ever so slightly. Elder Qiushi, don't worry. The third princess is blessed by the heavens. Even if everyone else is in danger, she will definitely be safe and sound. Elder Qiushi choked and felt that Chu Liyue's words sounded weird. However, he didn't know how to refute and could only fling his sleeves. Anyway, finding the third princess is the most important thing. Chu Liyue couldn't be bothered with him. Shangguanwan probably doesn't want us to find her yet. Help! Help! A hoarse cry for help suddenly came from afar. Chu Liyue found this voice very familiar and looked in the direction of the voice. Mu Hongyu widened her eyes. It's senior brother Zhu Hong's voice. It's actually someone from Dragon Teeth Mountain? Mu Hongyu was very worried and wanted to go over but was stopped by Qin Yi. Once you leave this barrier, you'll be swallowed by this black swamp in less than 15 minutes. Mu Hongyu was shocked and stopped in her tracks with an anxious expression. But that's senior brother Zhu Hong. He's not the only one. Chu Liyue suddenly spoke up. There seemed to be quite a few people in that dark shadow. She gave Mu Hongyu a reassuring look. Don't worry, I'll go take a look. After saying that, he flew in that direction. Perhaps it was because of the red-tailed phoenix, but she was obviously much more mobile than the others here. Mu Hongyu nodded and stared intently. Lei Laosi hurriedly followed her. Help, cough cough. Help. The closer they got, the clearer Zhu Hong's voice became. He struggled with difficulty in the black swamp and even dragged a few unconscious people behind him. The surroundings were pitch black and his body kept falling. The energy in his body also kept flowing away. His entire body seemed to be gradually turning cold. A deep sense of despair surged into his heart. Am I really going to die here? When I came, I said that I had to take good care of the sect's disciples. But now, Zhu Hong's voice gradually became softer as he laughed bitterly. Who can hear me if I cry for help in this place? I've already exhausted all my energy and I really can't hold on anymore. Zhu Hong closed his eyes. Zhu Hong? A clear female voice suddenly rang out. Zhu Hong opened his eyes and tried his best to look forward. A silhouette was heading in this direction. The red light reflected her figure like a sharp blade that tore through the darkness, giving off a myriad of colors. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 726. For a moment, Zhu Hong thought that he was hallucinating. He closed his eyes and realized that the person didn't disappear. Instead, he was still coming over. I've seen this face before. Chu Liyue. Zhu Hong mumbled in disbelief. Chu Liyue was already in front of him. When he saw Zhu Hong's situation clearly, Chu Liyue's expression froze. Half of his body had already sunk into the black swamp, and he was dragging 4 people behind him. From the looks of it, they seemed to have fainted, and it was all thanks to Zhu Hong tying them together with a rope that they were not separated from each other. However, Zhu Hong's face was pale and he was barely breathing. He seemed to have exhausted all his energy and couldn't hold on any longer. Chu Liyue immediately reached out his hand. Zhu Hong, give me your hand. Looking at the fair and tender hand in front of him, Zhu Hong finally realized that this was really Chu Liyue. Zhu Hong reached out his hand in a daze. Lei Laosi hurriedly went forward, grabbed Zhu Hong's wrist, and lifted him up forcefully. How can I let His Highness do this? Lei Laosi was strong and had innate divine strength, so he easily dragged them out. Before Zhu Hong could react, he had already broken free from that terrifying swamp. Lei Laosi set up a barrier and surrounded the few of them. This way they wouldn't fall so easily again. Chu Liyue smiled and glanced at Lei Laosi. Thank you for your help, big brother Lei. Lei Laosi's eyes twitched. I haven't seen His Highness for such a long time. When did he become so fond of joking? When he heard him calling him big brother, his legs really turned to jelly. Why, you're welcome. It's what I should do. Lei Laosi coughed and turned his head away. Chu Liyue teased him as her lips curled up slightly. Then she looked at Zhu Hong and the few people he brought along. They were indeed from Dragon Teeth Mountain. Chu Liyue took out a bottle of pills and passed it to Zhu Hong. Replenish your energy first. Zhu Hong subconsciously raised his hand and received the elixir. He opened the cork and a rich fragrance wafted out. Zhu Hong was shocked. The level of this pill was not low, and the ingredients used to refine it were extremely precious. It was extremely difficult for an ordinary person to obtain even one pill, but Chu Liyue actually had an entire bottle. Moreover, she gave it to him so casually, which showed how generous she was. Zhu Hong was a little embarrassed, but when he thought of his current situation, he only hesitated for a moment before choosing to accept. The pill melted as soon as it entered his mouth. A gentle force spread from his chest to his limbs and bones. Very soon Zhu Hong's complexion became much better. He looked at Chu Liyue with a complicated expression. I really don't know how to thank you. When I came here, I originally wanted to help Chu Liyue and the others. Who would have thought that in the end they would be the ones helping me? May I know who this is? He looked at Lei Laosi nervously. He was sure that this man was definitely not with them. However, his strength was extremely strong. Just by standing in front of it, one could feel the faint pressure. When did Chu Liyue know such a powerful person? This is big brother Lei Laosi. We accidentally met him in the Mystic Forest and he helped us a lot. She then looked at Lei Laosi. This is Zhu Hong. He's in charge of leading the team to Dragon Teeth Mountain this time. Lei Laosi sized Zhu Hong up. Zhu Hong instantly became nervous. You little brat, you're quite loyal. Lei Laosi chuckled. That's right. You're a man. He could tell that Zhu Hong could totally escape by himself if he wanted to. However, he still chose to bring these few people along. This persistence was really hard to come by. Zhu Hong heaved a sigh of relief and smiled bitterly. We're all from the same sect, so this is what I should do. It's just that. I'm useless in the end. If I didn't meet you guys, I'm afraid. Then he returned the jade bottle to Chu Liyue. However, Chu Liyue shook her head. You can keep this for now. Let's go to another place and feed it to them. There seemed to be a warm current surging in Zhu Hong's heart. His lips moved and in the end he only said 2 words seriously. Thank you. Chu Liyue smiled. Let's go over there first. Hongyu is very worried about you guys. Hongyu is here too? Zhu Hong widened his eyes in shock. Chu Liyue nodded slightly and was about to turn around. Pick. The sound of something breaking through the air was heard. Chu Liyue's expression froze and she looked up. A tree root that was as thick as an adult's waist suddenly swung over. It was very aggressive. It was extremely fast. Zhu Hong's expression changed. Run. This thing is dangerous. They were entangled by this thing just now and that's why they ended up in such a state. Chu Liyue's gaze was cold as she swung her hand. A sharp dagger flew out. Zap. That tree root was actually split open from the middle by that dagger. The red juice instantly exploded. The bloody smell was so thick that it was almost suffocating. That tree root swung wildly as if it wanted to get closer. Chu Liyue sneered. The next moment 2 thin flying daggers suddenly flew out from the dagger. 2 consecutive sounds were heard. That tree root was actually cut off. Bam. 2 pieces of the tree root fell together. The swamp surged and quickly drowned it. Chu Liyue raised her hand. The dagger flew back. The 2 flying daggers that were as thin as cicadas' wings had also quickly returned. It was clean and not a single mark was left on it. Chu Liyue looked at it with satisfaction and put away the dagger. The entire process was smooth and smooth. Zhu Hong was dumbfounded. Just now, what did Chu Liyue do? She actually managed to get rid of the berserk tree root so easily. Chu Liyue took a deep look at that half of the tree root that had escaped and smiled. Let's go. At the same time, in another place, Shengguan Wan groaned and a trace of blood flowed out from the corner of her mouth. Her expression was shocked and angry. Her face was flushed with blood and her expression was distorted. The strange black rune between his eyebrows also began to shake along with it. Someone actually managed to block her attack so easily. Those people were all geniuses with the Daijing Yuan Meridian. Originally they were already at her fingertips, but she didn't expect. Who is it? Sheng Wanwan gritted her teeth. Although her detection range was very wide and almost covered the entire mystic forest, there was one very important point. She could only sense the existence of those who were bound by Wan Yeshan. As for the others, she couldn't know. Therefore she couldn't guess who did it. However, there were a few people who were not in this range from the very beginning. Chu Luiyue in the group. Sheng Wanwan couldn't help but suspect Chu Luiyue, but she was a little uncertain. Because she didn't think that Chu Luiyue had such strength. Could it be? There were other powerful existences here that she didn't know? Sheng Wanwan was puzzled. However, she only struggled for a while and temporarily put this matter aside. If this group of people couldn't do it, then it would be fine to change people. The Yuan Meridian in her body had already recovered by a quarter. It wouldn't be long before it was completely healed. A faint green light flashed through Sheng Wanwan's eyes. Digression, 6 o'clock, torturing scum is very fast. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 727. Chu Luiyue just turned around and was about to leave when Zhu Hong suddenly stopped him. Wait. Chu Luiyue turned around and looked at him in confusion. Why? Is there anything else? Zhu Hong frowned and hesitantly pointed in the direction they came from. Actually, when we came over just now, we met a group of black cavalry. There were about a dozen of them and their situation wasn't optimistic. We were too far away back then, so we missed them. I don't know how they are now. Chu Luiyue paused. You want us to go and help them? Zhu Hong looked hesitant. At first he didn't have this thought, but he saw that Lei Laosi was extremely powerful and Chu Luiyue's combat power wasn't to be underestimated, so he had this thought. He actually didn't have much to do with those black cavalry. He just felt that it would be a pity if they died just like that. However, he also knew that he was asking too much of them. In this godforsaken place, it was already very difficult for a person to protect their own life. How would they have the extra strength to help others? If he had this ability, he would do it himself. Unfortunately, even he had to rely on Chu Luiyue and the rest to barely survive now. He already owed them enough, so how could he still ask them to do anything? No. Zhu Hong was silent for a while and finally shook his head. But just as he spoke, he was interrupted by Chu Luiyue. Where are they? What? Zhu Hong looked at Chu Luiyue in shock and couldn't react for a moment. When Chu Luiyue saw his expression, how could she not tell what he was thinking? There's also the Black Cavalry's Deputy General Mu Qinghe in our group, so it's reasonable for us to go and save them. As she spoke, she looked at Lei Laosi. Big Brother Lei, please invite everyone over. We'll go together. Okay. Lei Laosi wasn't interested in this matter, but since Her Highness had this plan, he naturally wouldn't shirk from it. Lei Laosi turned around and quickly ran back. Seeing Lei Laosi's figure disappearing quickly, Zhu Hong finally returned to his senses and looked at Chu Luiyue in shock. You really want to go? Did Chu Luiyue not know how much energy it would take to save people in this place? Why not? The corners of Chu Luiyue's lips curled up slightly. Her eyes were clear and there was a sense of valiance between her brows. These black cavalry soldiers were indeed led by Mu Qinghe, but at the end of the day they were once her soldiers. Sheng Wanwan wanted to use these people to seize their strength and seek a future for herself. He had to ask her if she agreed to it first. Zhu Hong stared blankly at the woman in front of him. She clearly had the appearance of a peerlessly beautiful young girl, and there was even a smile on her face. But for some unknown reason, her body actually carried a faint noble aura, as if she was looking down upon the world. For a moment, Zhu Hong felt extremely at ease. It was as if she would definitely be able to save everyone if she said she was going to save them. This kind of nobility and pride emitted from her bones definitely wasn't something that ordinary people could have. Didn't they say that Chu Luiyue came from an ordinary background? But from the looks of it now, it was very different from the rumors. Recalling how he said that he would take care of these people in Chongshu Pavilion, Zhu Hong's face flushed a little. All of them had probably underestimated Chu Luiyue. Lei Laosi quickly brought the rest of the people over. When Mu Hongyu saw Zhu Hong and the rest in a sorry state, she was worried and hurriedly asked, "Senior brother Zhu Hong, how are you guys?" We're fine. Just now Luyu and Lei. Big brother Lei saved us and even gave us elixirs. We're fine now." When Zhu Hong saw that Mu Hongyu was safe and sound, he heaved a sigh of relief. "It's good that you guys are safe and sound. When we first saw that you guys were missing, we were still rather worried. But from the looks of it now, those worries were unnecessary. From the looks of it, the few people who followed Chu Liwei were clearly the safest." Mu Hongyu then heaved a sigh of relief. Other than Zhu Hong, the others were still unconscious and in a sorry state. But looking at Zhu Hong's appearance, he did seem to be much better. "We had an accident back then. Forget it. All these aren't important. We'll talk about it in the future. The most important thing is that everyone is fine." Mu Hongyu looked at Chu Liwei gratefully. Thank you so much." Chu Liwei smiled gently. "Zhu Hong and the rest helped us previously, so it's only right for them to help us now." Zhu Hong was instantly embarrassed. "Chu Liwei isn't talking about the incident where he stood up for us at Pingliang Square, right? What kind of help can that be considered? Chu Liwei saved our lives." "Zhu Hong, you said that there's a portion of the Black Cavalry over there?" Mu Qinghe directly asked in a deep voice. Zhu Hong's expression also became much more serious as he nodded. "I did see some people just now, but I don't know if they're still there. But it hasn't been too long, so we should be able to find them smoothly." Mu Qinghe nodded. "Then I'm afraid I'll have to trouble you to lead the way." "Vice Admiral Mu, you're welcome," Zhu Hong immediately said. After saying that, he lifted his foot and was about to walk in that direction. "Stop." An impatient voice sounded. It was Elder Qiushi. His expression was very sour as he looked at Mu Qinghe. "Vice Admiral Mu, are you really going to save those people now? Have you forgotten that our top priority is to find the third princess? If we all go to save the Black Cavalry now, what will happen to the third princess? If the important matter of finding the third princess is delayed because of this, Vice Admiral Mu, can you bear the responsibility?" A trace of impatience and viciousness finally appeared on Mu Qinghe's face, which had never changed for the past 10,000 years. "I never said that I wouldn't look for the third princess. But now there's no news of the third princess and there's no clue at all. Even if we look for her, where are we going to find her? As the Deputy General of the Black Cavalry, I naturally have the responsibility to save my own soldiers. Elder Qiushi has always been worried about the third princess. Why don't you look for her yourself?" Elder Qiushi's face turned red and white. He was about to curse when he met Mu Qinghe's fierce and cold gaze. His heart trembled and he swallowed the rest of his words. "If Elder Qiushi doesn't plan to look for the third princess yourself and wants to follow us, then please don't mention this again in the future. We know very well what we should do and what we shouldn't do. There's no need for Elder Qiushi to guide us." Mu Qinghe's words were very rude and she didn't leave Elder Qiushi any face at all. Elder Qiushi had never been insulted in public like this before, and he could only gnash his teeth in hatred. He looked at Jiang Yuqing, but he saw that Jiang Yuqing didn't intend to speak. Clearly he was also on Mu Qinghe's side. Elder Qiushi secretly hated him. Mu Qinghe had been very low-key for more than a year, especially because of her previous identity as the Empress Concubine's confidant. She was cautious in her words and actions. Because of this, Elder Qiushi felt that he was superior to Mu Qinghe. He didn't expect that when he became tough he was still the same as before. Mu Qinghe looked at Zhu Hong. "Please lead the way. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network." Chapter 728. Then, under Zhu Hong's lead, everyone moved forward together and rushed in the direction they came from. After being scolded, Elder Qiushi finally shut his mouth obediently. This time, everyone's ears could finally be at peace. Zhu Hong had fed each of them medicine, and it didn't take long for them to wake up one after another on the way. Luckily, their injuries weren't too serious. With the effects of Chu Liyue's pills, they could barely keep up. After a period of time, Zhu Hong finally stopped, but his brows slowly furrowed. That was because there were only a few corpses left that were almost completely submerged. From their clothes and faces, They were indeed the Black Cavalry. However, the other people were nowhere to be found. Those people from before were all here. Why are there only these few left now? Muttered Zhu Hong. Mu Qinghe looked around, and her face was so cold that it seemed like there was a layer of frost on it. This black swamp is flowing much faster than before. Chu Luyue and the others hadn't been here before, so they couldn't compare. However, the remaining people, including Jiang Yuqing and the others, all realized this after taking a closer look. As expected, perhaps it's because of this that those people left this place? Guessed Zhu Hong. I just don't know how they're doing now. If they're still alive, everything will be fine. But if they're dead, it should be because of the movements caused by that mother tree. As Mu Qinghe spoke, she looked up ahead. That was the direction where the black swamp was flowing. After stopping for a while, he took the lead and walked forward. However, Chu Liwei purposely slowed down and walked to Qin Yi's side. Big brother Qin, the seal you mentioned just now. What exactly is it referring to? Qin Yi lightly shook his head. I only know that there's a seal below, but I haven't seen it personally, so I'm not very clear about it. As he spoke, he glanced at Tuanzi calmly. Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat. What he means is, Dumpling might know a thing or two. Dumpling blinked. Chu Liyue calmed down. It seemed that it did have some understanding. Dumpling, why didn't you tell me before? Chu Liyue asked inwardly. Dumpling buried her head in her shoulder. Because it didn't want her to go. It had been here for a long time and had vaguely guessed something. There was probably something under the seal that was not to be trifled with. From the very beginning, it did not want Chu Liyue to be involved in this matter. That was why he didn't say anything. Chu Liyue patted its head with a slightly restrained expression. Dumpling had already broken through to become a divine beast now. To be able to make it so fearful, it was most likely not simple. And Shangwanwan. She vaguely felt that something was wrong. However, since they were already here, there was no way to retreat. They could only face it head-on. The group continued forward. They were very fast. After about half an hour, they finally seemed to hear some movement in front. Mu Qinghe immediately looked over and saw a group of faint figures. It was the Black Cavalry. However, the number of people seemed to be much more than what Zhu Hong had said earlier. At a rough glance, there were at least more than 100 people. Mu Qinghe was about to go over when she suddenly realized that there were tree roots tightly wrapped around those people. Especially those people outermost. Almost all of them were covered in scales and were on the verge of death. A few of them were even unconscious. She didn't know if they had fainted or... The tree roots seemed to be trying to separate them, but the soldiers were still hugging each other tightly. They continued to entangle with those crazy tree roots. This scene actually seemed a bit solemn and stirring. The people who followed all fell into silence. Looking at this scene, they couldn't hide their shock. Mu Qinghe's expression was terrifyingly cold. She immediately wanted to go forward. Vice Admiral Mu, rushing forward rashly at this time, I don't think it's appropriate? Chu Liyue suddenly spoke. Mu Qinghe turned around. Her gaze was as sharp as a knife. What are you trying to say? Chu Liyue smiled and pointed at the spot where the roots were intertwined. As long as we get rid of this thing, we can naturally rescue them. Otherwise, it's just a waste of effort. Mu Qinghe stared at Chu Liyue for a while. The anger and impulse in her heart finally gradually suppressed. Chu Liyue was right. In the current situation, they could only use their wits and not force. The scene just now had a huge impact on her. For a moment, she actually almost rushed forward. You have a way? Chu Liyue nodded. Yes. A tree root flew over. Shangwanwan raised her hand and lightly drew on the tree root. The bright red liquid quickly seeped into her palm. Then it entered the dark green fireball in her dantian. The tempered power surged out from the fireball again and spread to Shangwanwan's limbs and bones. Sensing that another part of the Yuan meridian in her body had been restored, Shangwanwan let out a long sigh. The feeling of having power again was simply too satisfying. She already couldn't remember how long she had waited for this day. As long as she persevered for a while and devoured enough power, she would be able to recover completely. Shangwanwan flicked the tree root away and looked at her hands. Her skin had gradually returned to its normal color from its initial blood-red color. She believed that it wouldn't be long before she could. Suddenly, Shangwanwan's expression changed. Her chest trembled violently. Her legs went soft and she knelt on the ground. The pure gold sacred armor hit the stone platform and let out a muffled sound. Shang Guanwan's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. The net that she had carefully planned was directly cut off. That was more than 100 people. Originally, as long as she succeeded this time, she would basically be able to recover completely. But she was actually stopped by someone just like that. The energy in Shang Guanwan's chest and abdomen went berserk, almost tearing her internal organs apart. Blood kept flowing out from her mouth and quickly dyed the ground red. Some even fell on the chest of the pure gold sacred armor. "Who is it? I will cut you into pieces." Shang Guanwan shouted, herself hoarse. The corners of her eyes were scarlet and her face was filled with madness. Suddenly, the void in front of her trembled violently. Then a colorful stream of light streaked across. A ball of scarlet flames wrapped in a vast aura attacked her glabella. Digression, 12 o'clock. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 729. Shang Guanwan was shocked and immediately retreated. At the same time, she set up a barrier in front of her. She didn't know if it was because of the fireball, but the barrier she set up now had a faint green color. Boom. That scarlet flame hit the barrier hard. A loud boom sounded. The barrier shook violently. Shang Guanwan's heart seemed to be tightly gripped by something. Half paralyzed on the ground, she looked at the scarlet flame that suddenly appeared with fear and anger. She was afraid that it would rush over in the next moment. Fortunately, the power of the barrier was much stronger than she had expected. After an intense battle, the crimson flame was intercepted. It was just that the color of the barrier seemed to have become lighter. However, Shang Guanwan didn't notice this at this moment. When she saw that the scarlet flame was unable to break through the barrier and finally retreated, she finally let out a long breath. It seemed that the power she had devoured during this period of time was still useful. But where did that scarlet flame come from? Shang Guanwan supported her body and stood up with difficulty. She took a step forward and stared at the flame. Such a strong and bright red color. She seemed to have seen it before. And that flame was also floating quietly in the air. It didn't move forward or backward. This made Shang Guanwan have the illusion that she was being stared at. She felt uncomfortable all over. She clenched her teeth and wanted to get rid of that flame. But at this moment she had just dodged that attack with great difficulty. If she rashly faced it head-on, she wasn't sure what would happen. She wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth. There were some bloodstains on the pure gold sacred armor. This flame, that's right. Shang Guanwan's eyes suddenly lit up. Wasn't Chu Liu's flame the same color? Could it be that Tu Liu made a move? No. Impossible. Shang Guanwan frowned again. Tu Liu was here. It was already a problem whether he could protect his own life. How could he give her such a blow? She looked at the ball of flame again and her gaze suddenly froze. Within the flames there seemed to be a blurry figure. She stared at him carefully without blinking. Suddenly she sucked in a breath of cold air. The thing inside seemed to be a 9-colored heavenly pheasant. No, it looked a little different from the 9-colored heavenly pheasant. And the pressure was even stronger. Just as Shang Guanwan was guessing, the figure in the flames suddenly raised his head. Then he opened his eyes. A brilliant rainbow light flashed past. Shang Guanwan's heart skipped a beat. She reacted almost immediately and rushed forward. His origin power transformed into a sword and stabbed out viciously. However, that ball of scarlet flames instantly exploded. Bang! In the blink of an eye, he disappeared without a trace. It really was her. Chu Liu opened her eyes and a cold, murderous intent flashed across her eyes. Although it was only a glance, it was enough for her to recognize that it was indeed Shang Guanwan. She looked a little different from before. Although her appearance and figure were still the same, the expression on her face, there seemed to be something wrong with it. In addition, the black rune between her brows looked extremely strange as well. What made her feel the most disgusted was that Shang Guanwan was actually wearing the pure gold armor. Chu Liu pursed her lips tightly and her face seemed to be covered with a layer of frost. She had obtained the pure gold armor by accident back then and had always treasured it. She didn't expect that Shang Guanwan would take it for her own. Wu, how is it? Did you find out anything? Mu Hongyu's voice pulled Chu Liyue back to her senses. She closed her eyes and looked up. Her eyes were clear and calm. She nodded. That seems to be the middle of the swamp. There's a person there, but I can't see who it is. It's already very impressive to be able to find out this much. Mu Hongyu sighed. Chu Liyue smiled and patted Dumpling, who was on her shoulder. It's all thanks to Dumpling. She had finally persuaded Dumpling to help just now. It was now a mythical beast and had stayed here for more than a year, so it definitely knew more about everything here than they did. As expected, Dumpling directly found Shangguanwan's location. As for her, because she had a contract with Dumpling and their minds were connected, she could easily see everything that Dumpling had found out. Shangguanwan was very vigilant. For safety, she didn't let Dumpling stay for too long and quickly retreated after taking a glance. She didn't leave any clues for Shangguanwan. Recalling Shangguanwan's ferocious expression when she suddenly came back to her senses, Chu Liyue sneered in her heart. After doing so many dirty things in secret, Shangguanwan was naturally more guilty than anyone else and was more afraid of being discovered. Even if she was the high and mighty third princess of the Tianling dynasty, she definitely wouldn't be able to survive if this matter was spread out. Using such a despicable and insidious method to devour other people's forces and take their lives, just to help herself recover her cultivation. Once such a behavior was exposed, what awaited Shangguanwan was the cursing of thousands of people and the punishment of never being reincarnated. Of course she was afraid. At this moment Shangguanwan was probably panicking, right? Thinking of this, Chu Liyue's mood improved a lot. She looked at Mu Qinghe. Vice Admiral Mu, how are the soldiers? Mu Qinghe had just distributed the pills to the last batch of black cavalry. Hearing this, he raised his head and looked at Chu Liyue with a complicated expression. 4 of them can't make it and 21 of them are seriously injured. The rest are fine. Chu Liyue swept a glance at those people. The situation just now was so dangerous and the casualties were already better than expected. This was also because most of the black cavalry that came this time had stayed in the Dahuang swamp before. If it were ordinary soldiers, the result would definitely be worse. Mu Qinghe paused and said, "Thank you." Chu Liyue smiled faintly. Didn't Vice Admiral Mu already thank me just now? Being able to save them is the result of everyone's efforts. Vice Admiral Mu doesn't have to thank me alone. Mu Qinghe pursed his lips tightly. Although Chu Liyue said it casually, everyone present saw what happened just now clearly. Chu Liyue was the one in charge of everything. If it weren't for her and the red gold phoenix who cut off the coiled tree roots and burned more than half of them, the rest of them wouldn't be able to help even if they wanted to. Her actions were swift and almost everyone was shocked on the spot. Only then did they understand that Chu Liyue, who had broken through to the 5th stage, was stronger than they had imagined. Chu Liyue didn't claim credit, but Mu Qinghe couldn't accept this kindness with a clear conscience. The black cavalry was very important to him and he was indeed grateful to be able to save these people. As the Deputy General of the Black Cavalry, this gratitude is necessary. Chu Liyue tucked her hair behind her ear and smiled. Vice Admiral Mu, you're welcome. This is what I should do. She naturally had to save her people. Let's go to the center of the swamp as soon as possible and capture the mastermind behind the scenes. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 730. Chu Liyue's suggestion received everyone's approval. Now, they basically knew that someone purposely caused such a huge commotion in the Mystic Forest. Those tree branches that crazily devoured the cultivator's strength were obviously being controlled by someone. They could only leave after they dealt with the mastermind. Chu Liyue's gaze swept across the black cavalry soldiers. Actually, she still had an impression of some of them. However, things were still the same now, but the people had changed. She looked at Qin Yi. Big brother Qin, these 20 people. Do you have a way to take care of them? Other than the few that can't be saved, the remaining 21 people aren't in good condition either. The best solution is to let them stay and rest properly. If I force them to follow the main group forward, I'm afraid. Qin Yi stared at her intently as if in deep thought. It seems like Her Highness still wants to help. He paused for a moment and said, I can help them set up a barrier and let them stay here peacefully. As long as the extremely dangerous situation from before doesn't happen again, there shouldn't be a problem. Chu Liwei heaved a sigh of relief. Thank you, big brother Qin. Qin Yi's lips curved up slightly as he lowered his eyes slightly. A tinge of helplessness and indulgence flashed across his long and narrow eyes. Her Highness has already changed into another identity, and her appearance and figure are completely different from before. However, her personality doesn't seem to have changed much. He raised his hand and waved it lightly. A cyan-colored barrier was formed in an instant. It protected the 20 people within it. The barrier emitted a faint glow and was dense with boundless suppression. It was frightening. One of the black cavalry soldiers reacted first as he cupped his fists and said seriously to Qin Yi, "Thank you, young Master Qin." This voice instantly reminded the others. All the soldiers thanked him gratefully. Qin Yi chuckled. "You don't have to thank me. If you want to thank someone, thank Lu Yu. If she didn't save all of you first, we wouldn't be able to talk about anything else. Besides, if she didn't say anything, I wouldn't have bothered to get involved in this mess." Who asked them to be soldiers led by Mu Qinghe. Qin Yi knew that what happened back then actually had nothing to do with these soldiers, so he really couldn't blame them. But when he saw Mu Qinghe here, he felt very unhappy and even felt annoyed looking at these people. All the officers and soldiers turned their heads to thank Chu Liwei. "Thank you, Miss Chu." Even though most of them were injured, their thanks were still filled with energy and sincerity. They had all experienced countless life and death situations, so they naturally knew how precious life was. Chu Liwei had saved so many of their lives. How could they not thank him? A black cavalry soldier standing at the front suddenly lowered his voice and said, "That's right. Miss Chu, my name is Tian Zhuangzhuang. If you need anything in the future, just let me know. I, Tian Zhuangzhuang, will definitely not shirk my duty." He didn't say which squad he belonged to in the black cavalry. He only said his name. This meant that he was expressing his gratitude personally. Chu Liyue's eyes curved. "Miss Chu, I'm Zhou Kaiyun. We owe you our lives, so we'll do whatever you say in the future." As Zhou Kaiyun spoke, he secretly glanced at Mu Qinghe and scratched his head at Chu Liyue in embarrassment. Of course, that's when we're not wearing the black cavalry armor. Hehe. When they wore the armor, they didn't have a name and only had the title Black Cavalry. Obeying military orders was a soldier's duty. The Black Cavalry, especially the ones led by Mu Qinghe, had always been strict with military orders and followed them to the letter. But when they took off their armor, they were themselves. Those who could fight their way out of Dahuang Swamp were all iron-blooded good men. How could they not repay a favor? "I Jiangming Shantu." "Me too." "And Xinji." "And..." Voices rang out one after another. The deep and powerful voices reverberated, as if they wanted to tear apart this dark and cramped space. Chu Liyue felt something surging in her chest. He knew. He always knew. These people. She took a deep breath and suppressed the surging emotions in her heart. "I understand everyone's intentions. This is actually a small matter, so you don't have to worry too much about it. Those who need to recuperate stay behind. The rest will go together. When this is over, we'll look for you again and return together." Chu Liyue pacified the soldiers with a few words. Those who should stay all consciously stood on the other side. As for the large group who were about to leave after hearing Chu Liyue's words, they all stood together with high morale. Mu Qinghe looked at this scene and was secretly shocked. Chu Liyue and these soldiers had only just met, but she could already easily make them obey her. She seemed to have some kind of inexplicable aura that could make people unconsciously listen to her and do as she said. Honorable, dignified, but also full of affinity. Without batting an eyelid, she controlled the entire scene. She was like a natural superior. Even if she was only a teenage girl and came from an ordinary background, she did not feel the slightest bit out of place when commanding so many people. It was as if it was supposed to be like this. Mu Qinghe had fought her way up from the bottom, so she knew the temperament of these soldiers best. They had seen countless life and death situations. Their flesh, blood, tendons, and bones were almost all tempered. On the surface they looked well-behaved, but in fact they were very stubborn. Other than their generals, they would almost never listen to anyone else's orders. Even Shangguan Wan could not completely control the Black Cavalry. This was also another important reason why she insisted on bringing him this time. Only with Mu Qinghe would these people unconditionally obey Shangguanwan's requests. But Chu Liwei, probably it was still because she saved them today? Mu Qinghe thought silently in her heart. Looking at Chu Liuyue's pure appearance, she felt that she was overthinking. These soldiers also understood that even if they wanted to repay Chu Liyue, they definitely could not use the name of the Black Cavalry. Otherwise, who would the Black Cavalry belong to? Perhaps she was really overthinking. Mu Qinghe suppressed these thoughts and moved forward with everyone. After the red flame disappeared, Shangguanwan fell into deep fear and worry. Who was watching her? Who saw her? Who knew what she was doing? Previously, she thought that she would not be noticed by anyone if she stayed here, but now she knew that she was ridiculously wrong. She anxiously paced back and forth. With such a potentially dangerous existence, she really could not feel at ease. Oh no. Now I should recover my Yuan Meridian first. Just now she had prepared for a long time and was about to attack the Black Cavalry, but she did not expect to be stopped. Now she had to find them again. Her gaze turned sharp and she attacked in another direction. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 731. Actually, there were still quite a number of people left who could do it. For example, the disciples from those sects were almost all extremely outstanding geniuses. Needless to say, the Daijing Yuan Meridian was middle grade or even high grade. Shangguanwan checked around and quickly chose someone. The Yuan Meridian in her body had already recovered by more than half. She only needed a few more times to succeed. This made Shangguanwan feel much more at ease. As long as she could complete this task, nothing else mattered. She licked her lips and the dark green light in her eyes flashed again. However, she didn't know it herself. Just as she held her breath and was about to make a move, a strange sound suddenly came from behind her. Her heart skipped a beat and she immediately looked back vigilantly. At the same time she waved her force. At this moment her force had already turned into a light green color. It transformed into a sharp blade in midair and quickly swept over. Crack! The sound of something shattering was heard. She focused her eyes and only then did she see that when the black swamp surged, a ghastly white skeletal hand had floated out. Her attack just now had directly cut off the hand bone. The mud churned and quickly swallowed the bone and disappeared. Phew! Shangguanwan patted her chest and let out a breath with lingering fear. She thought that that thing had come to spy on her again. She turned around, intending to concentrate and do it again. A bright scarlet flame suddenly appeared in front of her eyes. Ah! Shangguanwan screamed and immediately retreated. At the same time she set up the barrier again. However, this time the red flame didn't come forward again. It just floated there quietly. However, this made Shangguanwan even more flustered. As expected, someone was spying on her in the dark. She was flustered and furious. She immediately went forward to get rid of that thing. However, a rainbow-colored light flashed and the flame disappeared again. Took another look. Shangguanwan was so angry that her liver hurt. Her chest and abdomen were suffocating as if they would explode in the next moment. The other party was extremely cunning, appearing so suddenly and disappearing so quickly that Shangguanwan had no time to react, let alone do anything. Shangguanwan was still angry for a while. She gritted her teeth and decided to solve the problem of her Yuan Meridian first. However, her state of mind had been completely disrupted by that ball of flame. Devouring energy to reconstruct the Yuan Meridian was an extremely exhausting task. Right now, Shangguanwan's heart was in a mess and her mind was in a mess. She couldn't do anything at all. She was so angry that she paced back and forth on the platform. The boots of the pure gold armor made a sound on the ground. It was cold and crisp, but it also carried a trace of heavy pressure. Patter. Something seemed to have sunk. Shangguanwan looked down, her eyebrows furrowed tightly. The bloodstains on the pure gold armor were slowly condensing into blood droplets before dripping onto the ground. That sound just now was the sound of blood dripping down from the arm that had accidentally rubbed against it. Shangguanwan's heart skipped a beat. She then looked at her chest and realized that the situation was the same here. These were all intentionally or unintentionally done by her. At first she didn't pay much attention to it, but now? Why does it seem like something is wrong? After the bloodstains dripped down, The pure gold armor was still clean and neat. It didn't look like it had been stained with blood before. Could it be that this pure gold armor is originally like this? Shangguan muttered in a low voice. She had only seen Shangguan wear this pure gold armor before. It was her first time wearing it, so she didn't know much about it. There were actually many traces of battle on it, but there were no blood stains. Perhaps it was really because this pure gold armor wasn't stained with blood, Shangguan thought to herself. When she thought that someone was secretly watching her, she became frustrated again. The other party was watching her so closely. Could it be that they had discovered something? And every time she wanted to try again, that fireball would suddenly appear. This made Shangguan uneasy. She couldn't concentrate on repairing her yuan meridian. After a long time, she still didn't find anything. Just as Shangguan was at her wit's end, the black rune in between her brows suddenly floated down and swayed in front of her eyes. Shangguan's pupils shrank. A trace of deep fear flashed across the depths of her eyes. A hoarse voice suddenly sounded from the rune. "Are you so useless?" That voice was low and hoarse. It was hard to tell if it was a man or a woman, but it instantly made Shangguan's face turn pale. Who are you?" A low laugh came from the rune, containing undisguised mockery. "Don't you know who you relied on to be where you are today? Why, you don't want to admit it now." After her guess was confirmed, Shangguan's face instantly turned even uglier. All along she knew that there was a mysterious existence in her body. She had heard this voice before. But only twice. The first time was many years ago. It was also that time that made her want to kill Shangguan. She had made up her mind to snatch everything from her. The other time was the night Shangguan died. At that time her yuan meridian had been completely destroyed by Shangguan. It was this voice that had appeared and told her how to restore her yuan meridian. It was not that Shangguan was not afraid. But she also yearned for Jiang Yuqing. She wanted to obtain power and authority. She wanted to obtain everything that Shangguan once had. Therefore she had always obeyed this voice. She didn't expect that it would appear in such a form today. Countless guesses flashed through Shangguan's mind as she looked at the strange black rune. She tried her best to calm herself down, but her body was trembling violently. So it's really you. Please forgive me for not noticing it just now. Slap. It was as if an invisible hand had slapped Shangguan hard on the face. The crisp sound of a slap instantly rang out. Shangguan fell hard to the ground. Her helmet was also thrown off. Half of her face instantly became red and swollen. Blood flowed out from the corner of her mouth. "You're getting bolder by the day to play tricks in front of me." The voice in the rune was cold and sinister. Shangguan struggled to stand up. "I didn't slap." This time it was the other half of her face that was slapped. Digression. 6 a.m. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 732. Shangguan fell heavily to the ground again. Her hairpin was knocked to the ground and her hair was scattered messily. This time she was hit until she saw stars and her vision turned black. She opened her mouth and her lips and teeth were filled with a strong smell of blood. All she spat out was blood. Her entire face was numb. After a short pause, the intense pain surged up like a tide. But this was not as strong as the deep fear that suddenly erupted in her heart. She knew that this mysterious person was very strong, but she didn't know that he was so terrifying. She had been easily dealt with. One had to know that her current strength was almost at the early stage of a stage 8 warrior. But when the other party attacked, she didn't even have time to react. She could only be beaten. These two slaps completely made Shangguan aware of the gap between her and the other party. "Now, are you willing to tell the truth?" That voice sounded faintly, like a demon's voice echoing in her ears. Shangguan's heart trembled violently. She curled up and knelt with her head lowered. This junior knows her mistake. This time she didn't dare to play any tricks. She could only obediently lower her head and admit her mistake. "Please give this junior another chance. If you have any orders, this junior will go through water and tread on fire without hesitation." In the past 2 years Shangguan had never knelt to anyone, let alone begging in such a humble tone. Father was in a coma and she was the ruler of the Tianling dynasty. She was second only to one person and above all. So kneeling at this time made her feel quite ashamed in her heart. But she didn't dare not kneel. Her little life was in the other party's hands. If you had done this earlier, wouldn't there have been so much trouble? The black rune swayed gently and sneered. Shangguanwan didn't dare to move. Your Yuan meridian has long been damaged by the Tianjing Yuan meridian. Logically speaking, it can't be repaired. It was me who gave you a chance to live. Now the opportunity is in front of you, but you are so useless. You are indeed mud that can't support a wall. That person's tone was slow, but there was an air of superiority. Every word was very straightforward, not leaving any face for Shangguanwan. Shangguanwan's face turned red and white, but she didn't dare to refute. Senior, please guide me. Shangguanwan was not stupid. She knew that the other party must have come for her Yuan meridian. Sure enough, the man continued. Your position has already been discovered. There's no point in running. You might as well make use of the time to heal your Yuan meridian. After you find the target, I will help you set up a barrier so that no one will disturb you. As long as you stay calm, everything else is not a problem. Shangguanwan was a little hesitant. But senior, there must be someone who knows what I'm doing now. If the news spreads, so what if I know? As long as you don't bump into them on the spot, no one can do anything to you. Don't forget who you are. She woke Shangguanwan up with a start. Her heart shook as she suddenly understood what was going on. That's right. She was the third princess of the Tianling dynasty. As long as no one saw her with their own eyes, who could force her to confess? If she was really exposed in the future, wouldn't it be fine if she denied it? When Shangguanyu died, the entire Tianling dynasty was shaken. Countless people suspected the cause of her death, and some people even almost found out that she and Jiang Yuqing were involved. But didn't they solve the problem safely in the end? Thank you for your advice, senior. No need to thank me. I have my own reasons for helping you. I'll give you 15 minutes. If you still can't do it, don't blame me for not giving you a chance. Yes. Shangguanwan didn't dare to ask any more questions. She quickly sat cross-legged and began to look for a suitable person. The black rune floated back between her eyebrows. In fact, this process didn't feel anything, but Shangguanwan felt that there was something extra on her forehead, and it was very uncomfortable. She held her breath and closed her eyes. As she looked for someone, she thought to herself, "This black rune." Actually, even she herself did not know when it had entered her body. All these years, other than the 2 times it took the initiative to speak, it almost didn't exist. Shangguanwan was vaguely worried, but she had always tried her best to ignore this matter and forget its existence. She didn't expect it to suddenly appear today. Moreover, it appeared in such a strange way. Don't try anything funny. Otherwise, your fate will be even more miserable and pitiful than you can imagine. The voice sounded coldly in her mind. Shangguanwan shivered and responded. Then she forced herself to retract her thoughts. The entire mystic forest, except for the area where the mother tree was, had completely collapsed. As a result, all the people who were trapped underground followed the black swamp and flowed towards them. Shangguanwan roughly checked and was suddenly surprised to find that the number of people she could sense was much less than before. It seemed that there were fewer people from the Black Cavalry and a small number of disciples from the sect. She felt a sense of suffocation in her chest. After wasting so much time just now, it was no wonder that there were fewer people. With so many people, there would definitely be people who could break free. Especially those who were in groups, their strength was extremely strong when they were united. If she didn't use some special methods, it would be difficult to keep them. Just like the 100 or so Black Cavalry from before, she had spent a lot of effort to trap them. She didn't expect that in the end. Shangguanwan took a deep breath and found a good target. It was those people from the Purple Shao Sword sect. What Shangguanwan didn't know was that during the period of time when she didn't do anything, Chu Luiyue and the others met several groups of people and gathered them all. Most of them were from the Black Cavalry and a small number were disciples from the sect. Fortunately, other than one of the disciples from Dragon Teeth Mountain who had died, the rest were all found. Although they were all injured to different extents, they persevered and kept up after some simple treatment. Speaking of which, this was all thanks to Zhu Hong. At that time he was the first to discover that Mu Hongyu had left. He had planned to bring people to look for her, but something happened to Jiang Yuqing. He made a prompt decision and dragged everyone from Dragon Teeth Mountain together. When they fell into the swamp in the end, they were still together. It was only later that he was unable to hold on and split into two groups. However, the distance between them wasn't very far. Other than that, there were also disciples from Holy Flame Palace and Tianji Mansion who were found along the way. Roughly speaking, there were more than 300 people in this group, including a small number of people who had to stay in place because of their serious injuries. There were almost 400 people. Unknowingly, Chu Liyue had become the backbone of the group. After all, only Chu Liyue knew how to find the mastermind behind all of this. In addition, she had contracted a divine beast, which attracted countless envy and admiration from the crowd. Even Jiang Yuqing, who had the highest status, had a slightly inferior presence. Suddenly, she stopped in her tracks and looked ahead. There's someone ahead. I'll go take a look first. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 733. Everyone stopped in unison and waited for Chu Liyue. Along the way, they were almost used to doing this. Chu Liyue would take the lead to investigate whenever they encountered any situation. After confirming the specific problem, they would act according to Chu Liyue's instructions. At first, some people weren't convinced. After all, Chu Liyue's slender figure and overly beautiful face really didn't look like someone who could do such things. But after Chu Liyue led them to avoid a few attacks and saved even more people, such doubts gradually disappeared. All of them followed obediently. Lei Laosi followed as usual. Chu Liyue glanced sideways and smiled at him. Big brother Lei, you don't have to follow me every time. We're so close. Even if something really happens, I can handle it. Lei Laosi paused for a while before speaking in a low voice. It's always good just in case. Her Highness is capable. But in this world, an accident that can be predicted isn't an accident anymore. Back then, Her Highness was only one step away from becoming a Stage 9 warrior. How valiant was she? What happened in the end? She was still framed by a traitor and died in a sea of fire. Back then, the 13th Yu sect was too trusting of Her Highness, so others took advantage of her. Now that it happened again, they definitely wouldn't let such a thing happen a second time. Chu Liyue looked at the stubborn Lei Laosi and felt warmth in her heart. Thank you, big brother Lei. Lei Laosi coughed uncomfortably. He looked up unintentionally and vaguely saw a few people. They looked like a few young people, and the one at the front looked a little familiar. Who is that? Chu Liyue followed his line of sight and looked over. Then she smiled. Isn't this Purple Shao Sword Sect's Song Qingyan? There were 3 people beside him and Yang Qin was one of them. At this time, Song Qingyan had just cut off the tree roots that wrapped around him and was about to help the others. When he heard the commotion, he immediately turned around vigilantly. Who is it? He first saw Lei Laosi in front and was secretly shocked. This unfamiliar man is extremely powerful. He gripped the sword in his hand tightly. Lei Laosi had already recognized Song Qingyan, but he still had to pretend that he didn't. He sized up Song Qingyan and sneered. You don't have to do this. If I want to attack you, none of you can stop me. Song Qingyan frowned and was about to speak when he saw Chu Liyue walking up from behind him. Big brother Lei, I know these people. Don't scare them. Chu Liyue said with a smile. Lei Laosi scoffed softly and crossed his arms, having no intention of helping at all. He had no interest in saving the people of the Purple Shao Sword sect. Chu Liyue, why is it you? Song Qingyan was still wary of Lei Laosi, and his gaze toward Chu Liyue was filled with doubt. She looked fine, as if she wasn't injured at all. He had sacrificed so many treasures and barely managed to hold on until now, but he still looked much worse than Chu Liyue. There must be something wrong with her. Chu Liyue's gaze swept across these people. Song Qingyan was still fine. Other than some bloodstains on his body, he was basically uninjured. After all, he was the young master of the Purple Shao Sword sect, and he would have many protective treasures on him. The others, on the other hand, were a little more miserable. However, Yang Qin seemed to be fine too. Chu Liyue suddenly recalled that Song Qingyan seemed to be hugging Yang Qin in his arms just now. She smiled. Young Master Song, don't worry. We were passing by here and came over after hearing the commotion. We didn't expect to meet you guys. We wanted to see if we could help, but it seems like we don't need to anymore. Song Qingyan sized up Chu Luiyue suspiciously and frowned. Help us. His words were filled with undisguised contempt. Chu Luiyue raised her brows slightly. Fine. Since he already said so, why should she stick her warm face to his cold butt? It seems like young Master Song doesn't think highly of us, so we won't disturb you anymore. Goodbye. After Chu Luiyue finished speaking, she turned around and left decisively. Lei Laosi chuckled and immediately followed her. Her Highness's personality seemed to have changed a little compared to before. If it were in the past, Her Highness would at least talk more with Song Qingyan on account of the Purple Shao Sword sect. But now, she turned around and left without saying anything. Awesome. Seeing that Chu Luiyue and Lei Laosi really left so decisively, Song Qingyan was stunned. What exactly does this mean? Looking at the two of them leaving, Song Qingyan frowned and anger rose in his heart. A mere Chu Luiyue actually dared to throw such a look at me. My Purple Shao Sword sect doesn't need anyone's help at all. Let alone Chu Luiyue. What a joke. Did she think that she could intimidate others just because she called an unknown powerful figure over? He retracted his gaze in disgust and pulled Yang Qin'er, who was closest to him, up before cutting off the tree roots on her body. Qin'er, you shouldn't be so weak. Is there something wrong with your body? Song Qingyan asked casually. Yang Qin'er's face tightened and she instinctively moved her wrist back. As the surroundings were dark, Song Qingyan didn't see the change in her expression. Well, maybe I'm tired from the long journey? Also, I met a bottleneck in my cultivation recently, so... Song Qingyan didn't really suspect anything, so he believed her after hearing what she said. It's fine. With me around, I'll definitely protect you. Yang Qin'er looked at him gratefully and thanked him repeatedly. Song Qingyan was in a great mood from her admiring gaze, so he threw Chu Luiyue's matter to the back of his mind. Then he made a move again, planning to pull the remaining two people up. We have to get out of this damn place as soon as possible. Before he finished speaking, a cold wind suddenly came from the darkness. Swoosh. The sound of something breaking through the air was heard. Several thick tree roots were thrown towards the few of them at the same time. Song Qingyan knew that this was bad and immediately pulled Yang Qin'er into his arms. Then he dodged backward. With his move, the remaining two people who hadn't been pulled out of the swamp were tightly entangled by the tree roots. Safe. The short cry for help came to an abrupt end. Crack. The sound of bones breaking could be heard. The tree roots actually wrapped around their necks and twisted violently. Their heads were tilted in a strange posture and their eyeballs protruded. Not long after, they completely stopped breathing. Chu Luiyue turned around with a sharp gaze. She tapped her toes and immediately flew over. At the same time, she raised her wrist and a ball of scarlet flames transformed into a fire whip, quickly wrapping around the tree roots. Dumpling! Chu Luiyue shouted. Dumpling's wings flapped and a colorful stream of light flew out. It intertwined with the scarlet flames. The flames directly drilled into the tree roots and spread all the way. Ah! The boiling temperature caught Xianxia off guard and she screamed. A ball of flames flew over. Swoosh! It actually directly penetrated the barrier and pounced toward Xianxia. Xianxia subconsciously injected her force into the pure gold armor. However, not only was the pure gold armor not activated, but it also repelled all her power. A look of deep shock flashed across Xianxuan's eyes. The pure gold armor, and it even had an owner. Digression. Today is the last day of June. Those who have tickets, please don't forget to vote. The tickets will be voided tomorrow. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience from love. Chapter 734. The shattered barrier instantly transformed into countless streams of light and condensed in front of Xianxuan again. At the same time, a black ripple rippled out from the rune in between Xianxuan's eyebrows. Quietly it stuck to the enchantment. Buzz. A terrifying pressure spread out. Boom. The two forces collided together. That ball of flame was finally blocked outside. However, the barrier was also shaking violently as though it would shatter at any time. Shangguanwan's face was filled with fear. Just now she truly felt the surging and terrifying power contained in that ball of flame. If that attack really landed on her body, she was afraid that. Shangguanwan looked at the pure gold sacred armor on her body and paused for a moment. Then, as though she had gone crazy, she quickly took off the pure gold sacred armor. Her actions were very fast. There was a trace of deep fear in her anger. She didn't even care that her hair and clothes were messed up. Bang! Shangguanwan threw the pure gold sacred armor on the ground. As though she was afraid of something, she took 2 steps back. However, her eyes were still staring at it. Her eyes were cold and ruthless with raging anger. It was as though she wanted to burn a hole in the pure gold sacred armor. How is this possible? How is this possible? Shangguanwan muttered to herself. Her face was green and white. Her chest was heaving up and down violently as she panted heavily. She clenched her fists tightly. Her nails dug deep into her palms and blood dripped down. However, how could she care about that at this moment? Countless thoughts flashed through her mind. It was as though her head was going to explode. The pure gold sacred armor used to belong to Shangguanyu. After Shangguanyu died, the pure gold sacred armor became an ownerless item. Logically speaking, under such circumstances, anyone could activate the pure gold sacred armor as long as they poured their force into it. However, just now, when Shangguanwan wanted to do so, she was shocked to find that her force couldn't be poured into the pure gold sacred armor. Didn't this mean that the pure gold armor still had an owner? No, it can't be. She's already dead. How could it be? Shangguanwan's lips trembled. She kept comforting herself, but her heart was still beating violently. Thinking about the situation just now, she couldn't calm down no matter how hard she tried, let alone convince herself. The pure gold armor lay quietly on the ground. It was exactly the same as when Shangguanwan first took it out. There was nothing wrong with it. Shangguanwan stared at him, her expression changing. No, Shangguanyu was definitely dead back then. His physical body had perished and his soul had dispersed. She had seen it with her own eyes. There was no way she was still alive. Thinking of this, Shangguanwan took a deep breath and tried to calm herself down. Could it be because the last bit of origin power in her body hadn't fully recovered? She turned her head to take a look. The few tree roots that he had sent out earlier had all been burned. It wasn't easy for him to find the right opportunity to kill the 2 purple Shao Sword sect disciples. However, before he could devour their strength, he had already. Shangguanwan was so angry that her lungs were about to explode. This person definitely did it on purpose. And this ball of fire. She looked at the ball of fire coldly and resentfully. In the center of the red flame, there was a gorgeous colorful stream of light that was also dancing. It seemed to be monitoring and also provocation. You guessed right. This is indeed Chu Liuyue's power. That hoarse voice sounded again. Shangguanwan's heart sank. She couldn't help but frown. But the power contained in it is clearly stronger than Chu Liyue. I'm not done yet. That voice lazily interrupted Shangguanwan. Other than her, there's also the red-tailed red phoenix, which is the 9-colored heavenly pheasant that was about to break through at the beginning. What? Shangguanwan widened her eyes in shock. This? You mean, the 9-colored heavenly pheasant has successfully broken through to become a red-tailed red phoenix, and Chu Liyue was able to move together with the red-tailed red phoenix. It was self-evident what it meant. This Chu Liyue's luck isn't ordinary. A divine beast like the red-tailed red phoenix is extremely arrogant. Under normal circumstances, it wouldn't form a contract with a human. Especially with a mere stage 5 warrior. That voice had a layer of coldness. It was obvious that it was also very surprised by this matter. How you worked so hard, but in the end it was all for someone else. These words were full of ridicule. Shangguanwan was already in deep shock. Being ridiculed like this made her feel even worse. Her hatred for Chu Liyue also deepened. She had only jumped down to repair her Yuan meridian. How long had it been? Yet Chu Liyue had taken the initiative. Divine beast. That was a real divine beast. She hadn't even seen it before. In the blink of an eye, Chu Liyue had already formed a contract with it. Bitch. It's useless to say this now. Even if a divine beast's soul is destroyed, it won't recognize a second master. You don't have to think about this anymore. Besides, Chu Liwei has probably guessed what you're doing now. The most important thing now is to repair your Yuan meridian and leave this place. Thank you for your guidance, senior. Sheng Guanwan suppressed the resentment in her heart with great difficulty. However, deep in her heart she was still brooding over this matter. The black patterns on the barrier suddenly scattered. Like a drop of ink dripping into water, the entire barrier was quickly dyed black. Sheng Guanwan's figure was gradually covered by the barrier. She thought to herself, Chu Liwei must be with the people from the Purple Shao Sword sect now. Since that was the case, she could just find someone else to attack. She didn't believe that Chu Liwei could really stop her. Sheng Guanwan sat cross-legged with her hands on her knees. Unconsciously, she glanced at the pure gold armor lying quietly on the ground again. Uneasiness rose in her heart. When she was fully recovered, she must take the pure gold armor for herself. The black runes fluttered gently. An invisible ripple flew towards the ball of flame. Boom! The flame exploded. Even the roots of the tree were blasted away by the explosion. Chu Liwei quickly retreated. Dumpling flapped her wings and a hurricane suddenly appeared. All of the chaotic energy was blocked. After a series of explosions, the entire space finally quieted down. Chu Liwei frowned. Someone was helping Sheng Guanwan. Unfortunately, the other party acted too quickly. She couldn't see it clearly. The key was that this person was extremely powerful. Even Lei Laosi might not be the other party's match. When did Sheng Guanwan have such a mysterious and powerful helper? A sobbing sound came from behind. Chu Liwei turned around. Xianxia was covering her face and crying in front of the two disciples who were already dead. He seemed to be very sorrowful. It's all my fault. Senior brother, you shouldn't have saved me first. Song Qingyan was also upset because of the loss of these two disciples, but when he heard Xianxia crying like that, his heart immediately ached. How can I blame you? You were the closest to me back then. Who else should I save if not you? Xianxia sobbed as she looked at him pitifully and innocently with her red eyes. If Miss Chu had taken action earlier, perhaps it would have been different. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 735. Upon hearing that, Chu Liwei raised his eyebrows and turned around. Miss Yang, what do you mean by that? Xianxia glanced at Chu Liwei. Her heart skipped a beat when she met his dark jade-like eyes. She quickly looked away as if she was on fire. She took half a step back as if she was frightened by Chu Liui's appearance. Miss Chu, don't misunderstand. I was just saying it casually. I didn't mean anything else. These two senior brothers are extremely outstanding disciples of the Purple Shao Sword sect. It's a pity that they died like this. I'm blaming myself. If I had insisted on asking you for help just now, all of this might not have happened. When Chu Liwei heard this, she looked nonchalant and her lips curved up into a cold smile. He thought that Xianxia would be more obedient after the previous incident. He didn't expect her to still be able to distort the truth and not distinguish right from wrong. However, Song Qingyan listened to him. He patted Xianxia's shoulder gently and comforted her softly. Qin, you can't be blamed for this. This matter has nothing to do with you at all. Don't blame yourself anymore, okay? After saying that, he looked at Chu Liwei. The gentle expression on his face instantly turned cold. His eyes and nose were no longer his eyes and his eyes were no longer his nose. Chu Liwei, Qin's words are not without reason. Since you can get rid of those tree roots so easily, why didn't you take action until the two of them were hanged? I think you did it on purpose. Xianxia had once unintentionally mentioned that she had unintentionally offended Chu Liwei. Because the Purple Shao Sword sect and the Chongshu Pavilion had always disliked each other, Chu Liwei had intentionally or unintentionally made things difficult for her several times. Recently, Chu Liwei had become famous in Xiling City, and Song Qingyan couldn't stand it. Coupled with Xianxia's nonsense, he was even more disgusted with Chu Liwei. Therefore, at this moment, he directly pushed all the blame onto Chu Liwei. Chu Liwei was so angry that he laughed. If I remember correctly, I was the one who offered to help at first, but I was rejected by you. Why is it my fault now? Young Master Song, Don't tell me you've already forgotten what you said at the beginning? Song Qingyan choked and his face quickly turned red. At that time he didn't put Chu Luiyue in his eyes at all, which was why he said that. Who knew that Chu Luiyue was actually so powerful? There were a total of 10 people from the Purple Shao Sword sect. 2 of them had already died and now another 2 had died. Other than him and Yang Qing'er, the rest of them were still missing. There was no trace of them. Even if Song Qingyan had a noble status, he couldn't help but feel a little flustered. He was the one who had brought people there, and all of them were disciples with the most potential in the Purple Shao Sword sect. Now that there were so many casualties, he didn't know how to explain it when he returned. This resentment was naturally vented on Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue, those who were dragged down here were more or less injured, but you were the only one who was unharmed. You know better than anyone else what exactly is going on here. You knew that the situation was dangerous, but you still chose to stand by and watch. If you really wanted to save them, you would have done it long ago. Why wait until now? Chu Luiyue was secretly sighing at Song Qingyan's increasing ability to pester endlessly when he heard Lei Laosi scolding him. What the f***ck are you spouting? Just as Song Qingyan was speaking confidently, he shuddered after being yelled at by Lei Laosi and forcefully swallowed the rest of his words. He looked at Lei Laosi angrily and embarrassedly. Why, who was he? He had never been insulted like this to his face. It was extremely unpleasant. Extremely humiliating. Saving you is kindness. Not saving you is my duty. We came over with good intentions and it's fine if you don't appreciate it. In the end you still want to blame us. If you're so capable, why don't you save them yourself? Aren't they all from your Purple Shao Sword sect? What has it got to do with us? Don't think that I can't tell. You were clearly at the same distance as those people just now. It's just that you're selfish and dirty, so you saved this one first. I heard that you're the Purple Shao Sword sect's young master? Huh. If the Purple Shao Sword sect's people knew that their young master abandoned his disciple for a woman, I wonder how they would react. Lei Laosi scolded Song Qingyan like a cannonball. Chu Luiyue touched his nose. Back then, Lei Laosi was a rather refined and elegant young master. He didn't expect his appearance to change now, and his ability to scold people had also improved. Song Qingyan was scolded until he couldn't refute at all, and he was so angry that he trembled. It couldn't be helped since Lei Laosi was stronger than him. Although he was arrogant and domineering, he wasn't brainless at all. If they offended Lei Laosi here, who knew if they could still get out? After scolding Song Qingyan, Lei Laosi looked at Yang Qin. Yang Qin cowered and hid behind Song Qingyan. Why are you hiding? Lei Laosi didn't know what it meant to have tender feelings for the fairer sex. He only knew that anyone who offended Her Highness had to die. You don't look old, but you're really good at sowing discord. If your mouth doesn't know how to speak, I'll sew it up for you. Yang Qin was so frightened that she hurriedly covered her mouth and hid behind Song Qingyan. She didn't dare to make a sound and only her tears fell. She hugged Song Qingyan's arm and shivered as though she was terrified. If it were any other time, Song Qingyan would definitely stand up for her. But not now. He was just forcing himself to stand there, so how could he care about Yang Qin? Chu Luiyue looked at the two of them in such a sorry state and wasn't interested at all. They were just things that weren't presentable. Now the person I'm most worried about is still Shangguan. With someone helping, I can't freely investigate Shangguan's situation anymore. Shangguan. I'm afraid she's really going to recover her Yuan Meridian. A series of footsteps was heard. Chu Luiyue turned around and saw that it was actually Jiang Yuqing and the rest. It turned out that they stayed here for too long and didn't go back. The people behind were anxious from waiting, so they simply came together. Seeing Jiang Yuqing in front, Song Qingyan immediately seemed to have found a backer. Yuqing. He and Jiang Yuqing were close in age and their family backgrounds weren't bad. Thus they had always been in contact. Jiang Yuqing's gaze first landed on Chu Luiyue. After confirming that she was fine, his heart relaxed slightly before he looked at Song Qingyan. Qingyan, so it's you guys. What happened? Why are you in such a sorry state? Song Qingyan hurriedly went forward and walked to Jiang Yuqing's side. Just as he was about to speak, he remembered Lei Laosi at the side and hurriedly lowered his voice. Yuqing, you guys must be careful of Chu Luiyue. Has a problem. Jiang Yuqing's expression changed slightly. Oh. Song Qingyan continued. Her relationship with that man is unclear. Just now she even threatened Qinra and me. That's strange. The two of them previously said that they would come over to take a look. Logically speaking, they wouldn't do such a thing. How could Jiang Yuqing not guess Song Qingyan's thoughts? If it were in the past, he might still have the patience to feign civility with him. But no. Hearing that Chu Luiyue was being slandered, he was very unhappy. He looked at Chu Luiyue. Liu, are you okay? Chu Luiyue's face turned cold and her stomach churned. Digression. I couldn't sleep yesterday. Added at 6 p.m. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.